Renbochin pulled Renwanyan's hand with a face full of resentment. Renwanyan rolled his eyes and laughed heartily. Anyway, even if the sky falls down, there will be someone taller to hold it up. You are the elder brother, and you are not married yet. Why should I be anxious? Renbochin was speechless. He had become a shield. However, when he thought about how it would be like this every time he returned home, he felt a headache coming on. It seemed like he would have to rent a girlfriend if he didn't want to be nagged. He didn't know if she was reliable or not. After staying at home for 2 days, he drove back early in the morning on the 3rd day. In the afternoon, he went to the supermarket and bought quite a lot of White Rabbit creamy candies. All of this was to bribe librarian Lin Chowla. Normally, little girls would like this, right? Like a weird uncle, Renbochin pondered over how to make the little girl happy. After all, being illiterate was not an easy life. He guarded so many scrolls, but he couldn't understand a single one of them. After buying a bunch of White Rabbit creamy candies, he went to buy 2 electric batons and charged them at home before returning Chen Qing's call. You finally called back. Otherwise, I would have reported you to the police and reported you missing. Renbochin smiled bitterly. This was basically the same reaction. How are the preparations for your engagement with Jiang Nan going? Renbochin asked with a smile. On the 8th of next month, you should be fine by then, right? Don't miss it, Chen Qing whispered. Renbochin could tell from his voice that he was probably with a girl now. After calculating the time, including today, there were still 10 days left. By then, he would be back. Only then did he say, "Don't worry, I won't miss it." All right then, I won't say any more. Chen Qing hung up the phone after finishing his sentence. Renbochin shook his head. They were getting engaged in 10 days, and he was still fooling around outside. It must have been hard on Jiang Nan to actually tolerate him. Renbochin hoped that after the engagement, Chen Qing would change his mind. Thinking about Chen Qing's character, he was usually quite reliable and should be able to do it. This was the last time he would go crazy before the engagement. At night, Renbochin directly returned to that world with a bunch of White Rabbit creamy candies and 2 electric batons. After waking up in the morning, he inserted the 2 electric batons into his waist. Renbochin felt that he was like a Jedi, except for the fact that the 2 electric batons were a little short and small. Just when he was feeling satisfied in the house, he saw a black shadow moving up and down by the window. From the shadow, it had a fat head and big ears, and the ears were even on top of its head. When he opened the door, he saw Tian Tian lying on the floor and Gun Gun stepping on its body, trying to think of a way to open the window. After seeing Renbochin, Tian Tian immediately got up and walked away. It didn't care that there was a fellow on its body. Just like that, Gungun's stool was taken away. It fell head first onto the floor and rolled around. After shaking its head for a long time, it crawled over and hugged Renbochin's thigh, shaking it continuously. Renbochin teased the 2 little fellows for a while and went to get a basket of bamboo leaves for them. In the morning, he went to the fields for a walk. When he was about to return, he saw a badly battered caretaker striding towards Renbochin. As he walked, he shouted, "Brother Ren, why can't you use your sect's secret treasure?" "Can't use it?" Renbochin was slightly puzzled. "Let me take a look. Also, what happened to your face?" Renbochin took it and immediately poked it at caretaker Shi. The badly battered caretaker Shi looked at Renbochin and laughed heartily. He almost slapped Renbochin into the ground again. "It's out of battery." Renbochin hid far away from him and said doubtfully. "Logically speaking, it should be able to be recharged more than 10 times. Why did it run out so quickly? How do you charge it? Do you want to be struck by lightning during a thunderstorm to recharge?" Caretaker Shi asked curiously. Renbochin looked at him silently. Be struck by lightning during a thunderstorm to recharge. Good idea. Li Yu and Bob probably had the same idea. The two of them must have a common language. However, the ancient people knew too little about electricity. Their knowledge was also very simple. It was normal for them to think this way. Why did it run out so quickly? Ren Baqian asked. He was curious about what Caretaker Shi did with this thing. He thought about Caretaker Shi's character. His two eyes were like national treasures. His face and the corners of his mouth were swollen with blood clots. Ren Baqian felt that something must have happened. Sure enough, it was as Ren Baqian expected. When Caretaker Shi heard Ren Baqian's question, he laughed heartily. With a proud look on his face, he said, "Those fellows still dared to show off to me. I fought against 8 of them." Chapter 65. Ren Baqian quickly took 2 steps back and said, "If someone seeks revenge, don't say that I gave it to you. Don't worry, Brother Ren. If they ask me, I will tell them that this is your sect's secret treasure." Caretaker Shi laughed heartily. Ren Baqian face-bombed. What a pig-like teammate. You took the stun baton to stir up trouble and even sold me out. You can fight against 8 people, but 8 of me can't even defeat 1 person. Ren Baqian wanted to cry but no tears came out. Who exactly did you beat up? Shi Guo from Lan City's Public Order Bureau, Shi Kai and Shi De from the Imperial Guard Camp, Shi Qing and Shi Jin from the Left Army, Shi Meng from the Department of Military Arms, and Shi Feng from the Left Army. These people always say that I am the caretaker of the Beast Park. Let's see who dares to say anything now. Caretaker Shi looked pleased. Ren Baqian's face darkened as he listened. You can find so many people with different positions to fight with just a stun baton. If I give you a gun, will you still be able to fly? Didn't you just beat up your own family? Ren Baqian regretted that this thing fell into Caretaker Shi's hands. It's out of battery. Let's recharge it when we have the chance. Ren Baqian walked back listlessly. Caretaker Shi was all smiles as he continuously bragged about how he punched the Public Order Bureau and kicked the guards away. If Ren Baqian did not see Caretaker Shi's bruised and swollen face, he might have believed him. Where is Shi Wanshan? Ask him to come out. Before Ren Baqian could return, he heard shouts coming from the front. This group of people found me so quickly. How did they find me so quickly? Ren Baqian's heart skipped a beat. He glared at Caretaker Shi. His meaning was clear: you are the one who caused this trouble. You should settle it. Give me another 2 secret treasures. I can still beat up 8 of them by myself. Caretaker Shi laughed. Ren Baqian was speechless. He took out a stun baton from his waist and threw it to Caretaker Shi. I only have 1. Think of a way to deal with them. Bear your own responsibility. Caretaker Shi laughed mischievously. With a majestic posture, he dashed in the direction of the voice. Shi Wanshan, you bastard, come out. The cursing continued, and he could tell that there were quite a few voices. It was likely that all of them had come looking for him together, or they had come looking for him separately and bumped into him at the door. Ren Baqian shook his head. This time, they were prepared. Was Caretaker Shi still thinking of fighting against 8 of them? Dream on. If he went, he probably wouldn't be able to return. It was better for him to find a place to hide. Don't let people follow the clues and find me here. After walking 1 round outside, Ren Baqian estimated that it was almost lunchtime before he went back. As soon as he returned, he saw Caretaker Shi standing there with his head and face covered in dirt. He could not even recognize his face. Brother Ren, they are too shameless. 8 of them are ganging up on me. Caretaker Shi pulled Ren Baqian's hand and complained. Previously, you said that you could defeat all 8 of them by yourself. Ren Baqian couldn't help but complain. I fought them one by one. Along the way, I fought against 8 of them. How can it be the same when the 8 of them attacked me together? Caretaker sure sighed. Forget it, let's find it next time. Renbochin had no choice but to comfort her. Your sect's secret treasure, no, it's just that one. The other one ran out of battery because of you. Renbochin threw Caretaker Sure aside and ran over to scoop rice. Needless to say, that electric baton must have fallen into someone else's hands. Ignoring Caretaker Sure's bruised and swollen face, the others also turned a blind eye. It was common for men in Dayo to be in such a situation. They even teased him a little. First, I fought against 8 of them. I punched the Public Order Division and kicked Swajun. Then, the 8 of them attacked me together. I was outnumbered. Caretaker Sure refused to relent and insisted that he once fought against 8 of them. The odd job workers in the courtyard roared with laughter. The hierarchy in this world wasn't that strict. These odd job workers were like company employees while Caretaker Sure was like the company manager. Both parties could still make harmless jokes. This made Renbochin feel rather comfortable. After lunch, Renbochin carried half a bag of White Rabbit creamy candies and entered the palace. While walking, he threw one into his mouth. It tasted pretty good. It had a strong milky fragrance. No wonder it had lasted for so many years. He chewed as he walked. When he arrived at Qingshin Palace Hall, Renbochin liked to chew. He found it troublesome to keep it in his mouth. Lin Chaola sat on the chair. This time, she finally heard the sound of Renbochin opening the door. She drowsily opened her eyes. After seeing that it was Renbochin, she yawned and prepared to continue sleeping. This is for you. Renbochin took out 3 White Rabbit creamy candies and threw them on the table. What's that? Lin Chaola finally opened her eyes when she heard about food. It seemed that foodies weren't just an attribute of Earthlings. It was the same for people from the other world. Looking at the 3 little things on the table, Lin Chaola snorted, "Humph, you want to bribe me with these things? This is for you. Try it. I'm sure you haven't eaten it before." Renbochin took out another candy from his bosom, removed the wrapper and threw it into his mouth. He looked like he was trying to abduct a little girl. Lin Chaola looked disgusted. Her hands moved quickly and copied Renbochin's actions. She removed the wrapper and threw it into her mouth. Oh! Lin Chaola's eyes widened. She looked like she had eaten something good. She wiped the table with her claws and the 2 candies were gone. Then, she said to Renbochin with an unclear voice, "What do you want to do?" "Teach me how to read," Renbochin replied. "I knew you were up to no good. 100 a day. This thing." Lin Chaola immediately fell under the taste of the White Rabbit creamy candies. She showed 2 of them to Renbochin and haggled. 10. This thing is very rare. You haven't seen it before, right? How can you make 100 such exquisite candies a day? Renbochin said. 100 candies wasn't a lot. 1.5 bags were worth about 40 yuan. It was much cheaper than hiring a teacher. However, he still had to bring them over from the real world. Furthermore, it was quite troublesome to bring a bag of candies into the palace every time. 50. Lin Chaola hesitated for a long time. Finally, she stretched out her hand and spread her 5 fingers. Renbochin was gratified. She was indeed literate. He finally met someone who could count. However, he said, 15. I really can't have too many. It's too troublesome to make them. Finally, after haggling, they settled on 20 pieces of candies a day. After that, Renbochin was elated. He could finally learn how to read. Let's start today. Tomorrow. I will sleep for a while more. Lin Chala immediately closed her eyes and laid her head on the table. 20. What about here? Renbochin helplessly took out a handful of white rabbit creamy candies. Yes. Lin Chala immediately opened her eyes wide. Teach me how to read first, Renbochin said. Give me this first. Lin Chala didn't back down this time. I will give you 10 first. I will give you the rest after I finish learning today. Renbochin continued to haggle like a hawker for a few candies. Chapter 66. The characters in this world were also pictograms. Even though they were different from Chinese characters and required a period of time to learn to write, it wasn't difficult to learn how to read. You just had to compare the characters in this world with Chinese characters. Knowing which characters to compare with saved a lot of effort. Renbochin's main goal was to learn how to read and not write. Every time Lin Chala wrote a word, Renbochin would compare it with his memory and write it twice. Then, he nodded and said, "Got it, next." Lin Chala was surprised that he learned 40 to 50 words in one afternoon. Have you really memorized them? Lin Chala asked curiously. Renbochin found all the words that he had just written, pointed at them one by one and said, "This is De, this is Yao, this is Her Majesty, this is Her Majesty." After saying them one by one, he folded his arms and looked at Lin Chala's slightly open mouth in surprise. A sense of pride arose spontaneously. At this rate, he would be able to learn most of the words in about 2 months. After all, there were only 3 to 2,000 commonly used Chinese characters. As long as he could learn 3 to 2,000 words, he would be able to say goodbye to being illiterate. At night, he told the Empress a story. The next day, he took a handful of white rabbit creamy candies to learn from Lin Chala. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Renbochin felt that Lin Chala's eyes were flickering when she looked at him. Could it be that she was shocked by my super fast learning ability? Renbochin was slightly pleased with himself. In any case, he graduated from university. Coming to this world and shocking a woman with his super fast learning ability wasn't something to be proud of. At this point, Renbochin calmed himself down and began to learn diligently. At night, he finally understood what Lin Chala's flickering eyes meant. The Empress was lying on the couch and elegantly took out a piece of white rabbit creamy candies from nowhere. At that time, Renbochin's eyes almost popped out. How did this thing fall into the hands of the Empress? Lin Chala, that silly and adorable-looking fellow, actually sold him out. Although it was just a few pieces of candies, this thing wasn't available in Dayo. Renbochin took out such a rare thing to bribe her but didn't offer it to the Empress. What would the Empress think? Renbochin swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he watched the Empress remove the wrapper and place the milk candy in her mouth. He took 3 large steps forward and raised a handful of milk candy above his head. "I have a gift for your Majesty. These are some milk candies that I have painstakingly obtained. Although they are not very precious, they are exquisitely made and taste sweet. I dare not keep them for myself, so I have specially come to offer them to your Majesty." Qing Yuan covered her mouth and chuckled as she took the handful of sweets away. The Empress looked at Renbochin and said, "At least you know what's going on. What's this called?" "Milk candies." Renbochin wiped off his sweat. Fortunately, he had brought more today. Sometimes, he would also eat a piece. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy for him to get through tonight. "From now on, I'll give you 1 dough every month," the Empress said casually. "Yes," Renbochin answered honestly with his head lowered. A bucket weighed more than 6 caddies. 1 bucket per month. Was this person eating candy like rice? In the future, the Empress would toss white rabbit creamy candy into her mouth before she fought with anyone. This didn't seem right. When he was talking about the investiture of the gods today, Renbochin noticed that the Empress's mouth didn't seem to be idle. Every now and then, she would put a white rabbit creamy candy into her mouth. Furthermore, looking at her expression, she seemed to be enjoying it. This made Renbochin suddenly realize that this empress had a special characteristic. She loved to eat sweets. Previously, she loved to eat steamed pork in double scoop and the like. At this moment, Renbochin felt that some of the empress's gluttonous traits seemed to have awakened. He hoped that in the future, she wouldn't find trouble with him when she had a toothache from eating candy. You said that you are also proficient in poetry, right? The empress suddenly asked when he was about to leave after he finished his story. Without waiting for him to reply, she continued, I remember now. Bright moonlight in front of the window, 2 pairs of shoes on the ground. Was this what you recited at that time? Damn it. Upon hearing this, Renbochin finally knew why he was almost dragged out and beheaded when he first met her. It's a slip of the tongue, a slip of the tongue. Bright moonlight in front of the bed, suspected to be frost on the ground, 2 pairs of shoes on the ground. Renbochin's forehead was full of sweat again. In a few days, some people will be delivering gifts. When the time comes, you will help to receive them, the Empress said coldly. Yes, Your Majesty. Renbochin was slightly stunned. He didn't expect that he would be given such a task. However, he still hurriedly agreed to it. Following which, the Empress sat on the couch and frowned. Renbochin had no choice but to wait for her. When the time comes, if there is someone, suppress their arrogance. If you do a good job, you will be rewarded. After a while, the Empress's voice continued to be heard. If you lose the face of Deo, you should know the consequences. Renbochin was puzzled. What did she skip at the beginning? If there is someone, suppress their arrogance. However, the latter part of the Empress's words made his heart tighten. He knew that the Empress in front of him was definitely not joking with him. He quickly raised his head and asked, Your Majesty, may I know who is coming? What's the matter? You will know when the time comes. I will get someone to inform you and arrange an identity for you. After the Empress finished speaking, she waved her hand and said, You may leave. After Renbochin left the palace, his mind was still at a loss. What kind of person? Suppress their arrogance. It should be easy to receive them. The most troublesome thing was to suppress the other party's arrogance. From the Empress's tone, it seemed that she didn't like the people who came. Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked him to suppress their arrogance. But who was the other party? What was his identity? How could he suppress them? Renbochin had no idea about any of these. However, after combining the Empress's last sentence, Renbochin understood something. In any case, he couldn't lose the face of Deo. If he did so, he would definitely suffer. As for the rest, he had to understand what was going on first. After returning to the Beast Park, Renbochin immediately went to look for Caretaker Sure. What's going to happen during this period of time? Renbochin asked. Caretaker Sure was a little confused. He didn't understand what Renbochin meant. Today, Her Majesty said that someone will be coming to deliver gifts during this period of time. Caretaker Sure pondered for a long time and counted with his fingers. Finally, he came to a realization and patted Renbochin's shoulder. So, it's Her Majesty's birthday celebration. Ah. Every year, many people from Great Xia, the Yun Nation, and the Qin Nation will come to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday. Many of them are the sons of those so-called aristocratic families. However, their physiques are like little chicks. It's not enough for me to strangle them. Renbochin felt that his physique was like that of a little chick. However, why are they coming to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday? Renbochin was puzzled. If the officials from Great Xia, the Yun Nation, and the Qin Nation were here to deliver gifts, it would be understandable. However, what were those so-called aristocratic families doing here? Chapter 67. After hearing Caretaker Shi's explanation, Renbochin immediately understood. Occupation, Empress. Strength, 7th in the world. Wealth, owns an entire nation. Appearance, fair skin, beautiful and alluring. Such a person, no matter where she was placed, would be a proper fair, rich, and beautiful lady among fair, rich, and beautiful ladies. It was very normal for people to have designs on the Empress. Therefore, every time the Empress celebrated her birthday, there would be many rich and powerful people from the other 3 nations rushing to Dayo. Every one of them was like livestock in heat, trying to get the Empress's attention. This was the only time they could come into contact with the Empress. Renbochin also understood why the Empress asked him to help with the reception. After all, these people were here to deliver gifts. She couldn't possibly let them stay in an inn by themselves. She had to make some arrangements as the Empress still wanted to save face. However, even though this group of people were here to deliver gifts, some of them definitely annoyed the Empress. She had been wanting to slap them for a long time. For some reason, she didn't say much about this matter, so she skipped a sentence. However, her meaning was clear. No matter what, they couldn't embarrass Dayo. This sentence was more particular. How was this considered embarrassing Dayo? If the Aboriginals were to do this, they would probably talk about how big their fists were when they were talking about poems and songs. When they were talking about romance, they would compare whose legs were thicker. After all, it was the Empress's birthday celebration. They couldn't possibly be bruised and swollen. Therefore, a talent like him who suddenly appeared in front of the Empress was used as a substitute. She didn't care how good he was. In any case, it was like this every year. No matter how bad he was, he wouldn't be worse than the previous years. Therefore, he simply put himself on the stage. Thinking about the people who might come, he reckoned that they were the elites of the younger generation. Those who weren't confident would definitely not come. The Empress actually asked him to suppress these people? Renbochin felt that it would be good if he wasn't suppressed by them. If he was not careful, he would become a prop or a stepping stone for them to show off. In an instant, Renbochin felt unwell. Thinking about the Empress's words, Renbochin felt that if he really became a stepping stone, the Empress would make him a stepping stone for the rest of his life. Thinking about that, damn it, I will fight it out with them. Renbochin's face was full of murderous intent. What are we fighting for? Caretaker Shi raised his head blankly. When is Her Majesty's birthday celebration? Renbochin asked. There's still 1 more month, probably. Caretaker Shi replied uncertainly. Why did His Majesty mention this to you today? Her Majesty asked me to accompany her and receive her, Renbochin said with a face full of resentment. Let's welcome them then. Anyway, we just have to arrange a place for them to stay when they arrive, Caretaker Shi said nonchalantly. Her Majesty also said that we can't disgrace Dayo. Renbochin continued to look resentful. Isn't that simple? Beat up anyone who was dissatisfied with you. Beat up anyone who didn't like you. Beat up anyone who didn't like you. Just beat them up until they can't open their mouths. Caretaker Shi laughed heartily. Renbochin sighed faintly. This was indeed the style of the Aboriginals. Needless to say, he might really have to bring along 2 thugs when the time comes. In this world, Aboriginals weren't the only ones who could fight. If that Long Wanli didn't challenge the Empress that day, he reckoned that he could do whatever he wanted. Renbochin greeted Caretaker Shi and returned to his room. The 2 little chaps were hugging each other and sleeping soundly at the door. Renbochin dove into his bed and started to ponder. Let's not talk about the background of the people who came this time. In any case, no matter how awesome they were, they definitely wouldn't be as awesome as Her Majesty. According to their individual standards, they could be divided into those who were outstanding in martial arts, literary talent, eloquence, and appearance. Those who were outstanding in martial arts seemed to be unpresentable. In any case, no matter how formidable they were, they wouldn't be as formidable as Her Majesty. In the entire world, there were only 6 people who were more formidable than her. He reckoned that these people wouldn't come. After all, experts had to maintain their status. It was even more impossible for them to think of robbing the cradle, right? As for those who were outstanding in literary talent, Her Majesty had specially mentioned poetry and songs previously. Judging from the Empress's words, the Empress probably wanted him to suppress these people. There weren't many cultured people in Dayo. Furthermore, this bunch of people still came over every year to show off their literary talent. The Empress was probably already very annoyed. Renbochin thought that if a certain master's or PhD student came to his place every day to brag about their fields of expertise, his heart definitely wouldn't be filled with endless admiration like a torrential river. Instead, he would want to slap their faces with the soles of his shoes. He reckoned that the Empress had this kind of feeling. What was that saying again? When the monarch worries, his subjects worry. When the monarch is humiliated, his subjects die. Even though he was a successor to socialism in the 21st century, his immediate superior was the Empress. If the Empress wanted to slap their faces with the soles of her shoes, he would be the vanguard. After thinking it through, Renbochin more or less had some confidence in himself. Even though the people he would be facing might be elites from various clans in other countries, he was still a university graduate. He couldn't possibly be inferior to a few elites from a feudal society. There was still some time left. Next time, he would go back and memorize 300 Tang and Song poems. He didn't believe that the crystallization of the wisdom of the ancients couldn't defeat a few elites from a few clans. Even though he could also make their eyeballs pop out of their sockets when he competed with them in mathematics, the final result would probably be like a chicken talking to a duck. There wasn't much meaning to it. The next day, Renbochin arrived at Qingxin Palace Hall. After seeing Lin Xiaola, he had a look of hidden bitterness on his face. He was wondering if he should bring her poop-flavored chocolate or chocolate-flavored poop next time. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Lin Xiaola asked unnaturally when she saw Renbochin's resentful gaze. Renbochin thought for a while and didn't say anything. After all, as a man, he couldn't be calculative with a little girl. It would give people the impression that he was narrow-minded. Even though he was indeed narrow-minded. He decided to bring her chocolate-flavored poop. The other party wasn't a fool. She probably wouldn't eat poop-flavored chocolate. Let's continue. Renbochin pulled a stool over and sat directly opposite her. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Lin Xiaola heaved a sigh of relief. She was still a little nervous just now. Even though she felt that this feeling was very baffling. Renbochin spent the entire afternoon learning a few dozen words. At the end of the lesson, he also reviewed what he learned yesterday. Seeing that he hadn't forgotten anything, Renbochin immediately felt very satisfied. At night, he went to the palace to tell a story as usual. At the same time, he gave the Empress a bag of white rabbit creamy candy. This made the Empress rather satisfied. She felt that Renbochin was rather tactful and found him increasingly pleasing to the eye. It wouldn't be a problem for a bunch of burly men in the imperial court to lead troops into battle. However, it would be difficult for them to be tactful and tactful. Following the birth of Neza, the evisceration of his father, the lotus incarnation, Jiang Zia's descent from the mountain, and the burning of the Pipa spirit, the story became more and more exciting. Even the Empress rarely interrupted him. Instead, she concentrated on listening to the story. From time to time, she would put a piece of white rabbit creamy candy in her mouth. One person told the story while the other 3 listened. Sometimes, the fire in the palace flickered due to the wind. Renbochin suddenly felt that this kind of atmosphere was a little suitable for telling a ghost story. However, when he thought about the Empress's fighting strength, Renbochin felt that it was better to forget this idea as soon as possible. If other women were to listen to a ghost story, they might become a helpless little bird. If the Empress wasn't afraid while listening to a ghost story, it would be fine. If she was really afraid, she would give him a slap. Next year, today would be his death anniversary. That night, the story of the investiture of the gods was told a little later than usual. Since the Empress didn't say anything, Rinpoche told it all the way until Boei Kao went to Zhaoga to pay tribute and was sent to prison. Only then was he released by the Empress. The next morning, Rinpoche dragged Tinghulu and Tai Dao out for a walk. After returning home tonight, it would be Qin Qing's engagement day. He wanted to see if there were any good things to buy as a gift. Although he already knew that Dayo was lacking in supplies, after visiting a few shops on Jingyang Street, he realized that it was far more lacking than he thought. Most of the things sold in the shops were refined rice, refined flour, wine, salt, cloth, and other necessities. Furthermore, the prices weren't low. There were also a few shops that sold brightly colored cloth, silk satin, exquisite porcelain, and the like. The prices could make Rinpoche spurt blood. Originally, Rinpoche wanted to choose a gift for Qin Qing here. In the end, after walking around for a long time, he still couldn't find anything suitable. Chapter 68. When he woke up again, it was already early in the morning. Looking at the sky that was just starting to brighten, Rinpoche lay in bed for a long time before getting up. Today was Qin Qing's engagement day. No matter what, he had to make a trip there. The 2 work suits in the wardrobe could no longer be worn. Rinpoche measured his body size and realized that he had gained at least 10 kilograms recently. Originally, he was around 120 kilograms, but now he was at least 130 kilograms. His meals were all meat from morning to night. It would be strange if he didn't get fat. On Earth, Rinpoche's physique was just right. However, in Dayo, according to caretaker Sher, he was as thin and weak as a chicken. He casually put on some clothes and went out for breakfast. Then he went to buy a blue suit, which cost him a few thousand yuan. It was not very expensive, but it was quite suitable for him. After that, he gave Qin Qing a call to ask about the engagement date. When he found out that it was night time, Rinpoche ran to the supermarket and bought a huge pile of white rabbit creamy candies and various kinds of chocolates, including 15 kilograms of white rabbit creamy candies and various kinds of chocolates. He spent about 2,000 yuan. After stuffing these things into the trunk, Rinpoche went to buy 300 poems of the Tang dynasty and 300 poems of the Song dynasty. Since the Empress had personally instructed him to do so, he didn't dare to be careless. He planned to memorize it and see if anyone dared to act pretentiously, he would rebuke them. After sending everything home, Rinpoche lay on the sofa and groaned. He felt that the sofa on Earth was much more comfortable than the stool in that world. It was extremely hard. If he wanted to make a sofa, he would have to wait for some time for the leather to be tanned. Looking at the time, it would take another 8 to 10 days. At that time, he would send a set to the Empress and then make a long set to put in his room. That way, he would have a place to lie down at night. After lying on the sofa for a while, he got up to charge the electric baton and uploaded the photos to his computer. Then, he registered a new Weibo account called Starting from Zero and uploaded the photos of Tian Tian and Gun Gun. Some were sleeping, some were fooling around, some were throwing a tantrum, and some were hugging his thighs. There were 20 to 30 pictures in a row. After that, he selected a few photos of the Beast Park that he felt were pretty good and uploaded them. Regardless of whether or not anyone paid attention to this Weibo post, it was still a record of his time in the other world. After doing all these, Rinpoche took out 300 poems of the Tang dynasty and started to recite it. If he wanted to follow the Empress's instructions and use the soles of his shoes to slap people's faces, he had to first memorize it thoroughly. A month's time was neither long nor short. 3 days in the real world was equivalent to 1 day in the other world. In the other world, he could return 6 or 7 times a month. The time in the two worlds added together was about 1.5 months. But time was still tight. He had to work hard to show off and slap faces. Wait a minute, did he remember something wrong? Suddenly, a thought flashed across Renbochen's mind. Something seemed to be amiss. First, the Empress's birthday was in a month's time. Caretaker Sher's estimate was just about right. Secondly, the feudal society was not like the modern society. At that time, transportation was not developed. Ordinary people would not be far from home for their entire lives. A long journey would easily take 10 days to half a month, and they would not even be in the same country. For a big event like the Empress's birthday, they would definitely set off in advance. As such, there was an 80% chance that they would arrive in advance as well. It would be normal for them to arrive 10 days or even half a month earlier. There was not much time left for Renbochen. If there were people who would arrive a month earlier, Renbochen was afraid that he would have to go into battle immediately. This was not just a matter of urgency, it was simply a matter of life and death. At the thought of this, Renbochen immediately jumped up from the sofa. He held onto a book and memorized it by rote for the entire afternoon. He had never worked so hard even when he was in school. This level of hard work could only be compared to the college entrance examination. After half a day, Renbochen felt dizzy and put down the book. After resting for a while, he changed his clothes and headed to the hotel where Chen-Qing and Jiang-Nan were getting engaged. When he reached the entrance, he saw Chen-Qing in a red suit and Jiang-Nan in a red dress. Both of them were standing at the entrance to welcome the guests. Chen-Qing came from a wealthy family. Even though Jiang-Nan's family was not as wealthy, her parents were both professors and could be considered as a scholarly family. Both of them stood there. They were indeed a talented couple. Yes, as mentioned previously, Jiang-Nan was not considered beautiful, but she had an exceptionally attractive intellectual and tranquil charm. Upon seeing Renbochen, Chen-Qing laughed heartily and came over to give him a hug. The present is me. You have everything that I have and everything that I don't. Renbochen spread his hands and said. He really did not think of anything to give to Chen-Qing. You are very secretive now. It's good that you are here. Chen-Qing smiled and patted his shoulder. Renbochen grimaced in pain. Chen-Qing did not use much strength, but his shoulder had been patted by Caretaker Sher a few times and was already bruised. Congratulations, Jiang-Nan. Renbochen greeted Jiang-Nan again. I finally get to see the two of you. Jiang-Nan's face was filled with happiness. She pursed her lips and smiled, thank you. However, I have not seen you for a while. I have been very busy recently, you know that. Renbochen spread his hands and joked. Busy eating. You have gained so much weight. Renbochen laughed heartily. After greeting the two of them, Renbochen was brought inside and arranged to sit at a table next to the main table. The two families did not organize the engagement too extravagantly. It was just about 4 to 5 tables of relatives and friends who had a good relationship with each other. Xiao Ren, you are here. Chen-Qing's father greeted him when he saw him. Uncle. Call me Bochen. Otherwise, it sounds like you are scolding me. Renbochen said helplessly. This caused Chen-Qing's father to laugh heartily. However, it was, after all, an engagement banquet for both parties. There was no time for him to entertain Renbochen. Father Chen's main focus was on greeting Jiang-Nan's family and getting to know them better. Renbochen sipped his tea at the side. In his mind, he was silently reciting the 300 Tang poems that he had memorized in the afternoon to deepen his memory. Following which, Renbochen was in a daze. Occasionally, he would come back to his senses and look at Chen-Qing and Jiang-Nan's joyful faces. He wished them well in his heart. After attending the engagement banquet, Renbachien thought about how his mother almost made him go on a blind date 2 days ago. He shook his head slightly. If his situation did not change, he would not be able to find a girlfriend. When he walked out of the hotel, Renbachien shrunk his neck as the wind blew at him. The weather was indeed cold. He quickly got into the car and switched on the air conditioner. After a while, he felt a little warmer. After driving home, he turned on his computer and took a look at his newly registered Weibo account. Even though it did not matter if anyone noticed this Weibo account, he still hoped that some people would see it and follow it. After all, it was his footprints from another world. After logging into his account, Renbachien saw that there were hundreds of likes and more than 10 comments. He was somewhat happy. He opened up the comments and browsed through them. Almost all of them were asking if he was working at a zoo or which zoo he was in. There were only 2 comments that said that the scenery was pretty good. They asked where he was and wanted to take a look. Sure enough, national treasures were the most attractive. The next day, Renbachien memorized books for the whole day. In the afternoon, he felt dizzy and his brain was like a lump of paste. He threw the books aside and went downstairs to drive around. He could relax a little. He wandered around the city aimlessly. When he passed by a corner, he saw a plainly dressed girl walking in front of him with many bags. He sighed in his heart. A few months ago, he was also struggling to survive in the city like this. He didn't drive very fast. When he passed by, he turned his head to take a look. She looked pretty. The next second, he felt that she looked familiar. He pondered for a while and couldn't match the person in his memory. He noticed a red hearing aid on her ear and suddenly remembered who she was. Chapter 69. Renbachien looked at her walking by the roadside with her bags. It seemed like she was going to move or go to the train station. He felt a little sympathy for her. After all, he used to be like her. He knew that it wasn't easy for a young person to survive in this city, let alone a disabled girl. Renbachien had nothing to do and met this girl who gave him a good impression. He stopped the car not far away, opened the door, and walked to the back of the car. "Do you remember me?" Renbachien walked in front of the girl and asked loudly. He didn't know how loud he should be for the girl to hear him. "Last time, at a restaurant, a classmate of mine drank too much." He suddenly jumped out like a robber, and the girl was shocked. After seeing the person in front of her, she recalled carefully and showed a look of sudden realization. "Do you need help?" Renbachien saw her expression and knew that she remembered him. The girl put the luggage she was carrying on the ground, took out a small notebook from her pocket, and wrote, "I remember, thank you." "Do you need help?" Renbachien pointed at the luggage again. "Where are you going?" "I can do it myself, thank you," the girl wrote. "Are you going home?" "To the station. I lost my job and changed my residence. I used to live in a dormitory." Renbachien was slightly stunned. He didn't expect her to not live there anymore. Although it wasn't difficult for ordinary people to find a job, it was much more difficult for her. After all, not all bosses would accept a disabled person in their shop. But thinking about it, she should have some support groups for the disabled, such as WeChat groups, to help her find a job. "Where do you live? Let me send you there. Consider it an apology for my classmates' rudeness. Anyway, I have nothing to do and am wandering around." Renbachien was telling the truth. He really had nothing to do now. During the day, he had memorized Tang poems. Now, he was wandering around aimlessly. He was completely out to relax. The girl showed a distressed expression. It was indeed difficult for her to carry these things. Although the place she wanted to go wasn't far, it wasn't near either. "It's hard to get a taxi in this area." Seeing her expression, Renbochin picked up one of her luggage and said, "Don't worry, I don't have any bad intentions. I just want to apologize for what happened last time. Since I have nothing to do, I will help you if I can. Looking at the things you're carrying, it shouldn't be too far. It won't take me much effort." Seeing this, the girl finally nodded. After getting into the car, she flipped open a "thank you" message and showed it to him. Renbochin waved his hand. "Which way?" The girl wrote down an address. Renbochin took a look at it and entered it into the navigation system. It wasn't too far away. If he were to walk, it would be about 1 kilometer. However, it would indeed be somewhat troublesome to carry these things. "Have you found a new job?" Renbochin asked. "We will find it soon," the girl wrote. From her words, Renbochin could feel her drive. "I'm sorry, what's your name?" Renbochin asked apologetically. The waiter did call his name before, but he had forgotten about it. "Anfi." "Very nice," Renbochin casually praised. Anfi went back to the thank you card. She seemed to have written some common phrases on a piece of paper. Each piece of paper was a word, and when needed, she could just use it. The place that Anfi went to was a relatively old neighborhood. The rubbish bin in the courtyard seemed to have been left uncleaned for 2 days. After sending her downstairs, Anfi wrote on a piece of paper, "Thank you. When I find a new job, I will treat you to a meal. Can you give me your phone number?" Renbochin smiled and wrote his phone number on the paper. Then, he watched her walk into the corridor. He sat in the car and stared blankly for a while. He felt that he had changed a lot recently. If it was in the past, he definitely wouldn't have done such a thing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been immersed in his own world after attending school for so many years. He didn't even have a single friend. After coming out for a stroll, he was more or less relaxed. He found a place to have a meal and went back to memorize. When he opened his eyes and saw the familiar wooden beam, Renbochin shook his head and sat up. He was still holding the book, 300 Poems of the Tang Dynasty. Even though he had slept, his brain was still a little numb. He felt that if he continued to memorize, he would become a fool. It was better to go out and play with Gun Gun and Tian Tian. Beside him was a bag filled with White Rabbit creamy candies, chocolate, and stun batons. After stuffing 2 stun batons into his waist, Renbochin felt that he had regained the vigor of a Jedi. "From today onwards, I will continue to work hard to slap people with the soles of my shoes in the morning, learn to read in the afternoon, and tell stories to His Majesty at night." After thinking about the things that he had to do every day, Renbochin pushed open the door and picked up 2 pandas who were sleeping soundly. He swung his sword around like a storm before he finally put down the 2 fellows whose eyes were emitting stars. Once Tian Tian and Gun Gun landed on the ground, they stumbled and wanted to find Renbochin to take revenge. In the end, one of them stumbled and knocked into the door frame, while the other stumbled and fell from the stone floor. They rolled and rolled on the ground. Renbochin quickly raised his camera and took a photo of their silly and adorable behavior. When he was eating breakfast, Renbochin suddenly remembered that the fans should be ready. He went out with Tinghulu and Tai Dao. When he came back, the 2 of them each carried 10 fans. He threw them to Tong Jia and asked him to make the outer box the same way as the previous time. As for the color, there was no need for it. It was not as troublesome as the previous time. Anyway, there was no competition for this thing. He could sell it however he wanted as long as it was useful. If the things he sold were more exquisite than the ones he gave to the Empress, then he would be asking for trouble. "Brother, I've brought back your sect's secret treasure." Just as Renbochin was in a daze, he heard Caretaker Shi's voice. He turned around and saw Caretaker Shi, whose face had yet to recover, tossing an electric baton up and down in his hand. He had a complacent look on his face. Renbochin didn't even need to think to know that this thing was definitely out of battery again. Otherwise, with Caretaker Shi's martial prowess, he would definitely not be able to retrieve it. Renbochin reached out and took the electric baton. He was afraid that Renbochin would mention the electric baton again, so he diverted his attention and asked, "How's the shop on Jingyang Road?" "I put up the sign yesterday, but I couldn't find you. Our shaved ice shop's reputation has spread out recently. We didn't do it outside like we did in the beginning. Many people came in after we put up the sign." As expected, Caretaker Shi was in high spirits when he mentioned this. Then, he grinned and stretched out his 5 fingers happily. "Just like you said, I tripled the price for foreigners. 15 copper coins a bowl. They had plenty of money anyway. Hey, look at their faces. I haven't felt so carefree in a long time." Chapter 70. In the afternoon, Renbochin was learning calligraphy from Lin Chaola in Qingxin Palace Hall when he heard footsteps approaching. It sounded like there were quite a few people. He got up and walked to the entrance of the palace hall. The Empress, who was dressed in red, brought 2 palace maids and an imperial guard named Exanjia. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Renbochin quickly bowed. Upon hearing his voice, Lin Chaola immediately scuttled out from behind the table, bounced to the Empress's side, and greeted, "Your Majesty." "Yes." The Empress's expression became much gentler when she saw Lin Chaola. Renbochin was speechless. Lin Chaola actually hid her skills so well. No wonder she was able to become a librarian at such a young age. No wonder she gave the milk candy to the Empress as a gift. Although he didn't know what their relationship was, they seemed to be familiar with each other from their expressions. The Empress walked past him with her entourage. Renbochin smelled a delicate fragrance and followed them obediently. Upon entering the palace hall, the Empress saw a pen and paper on the table with half-written words. "Are you practicing calligraphy? I wasn't familiar with Dayo's language previously." "I'm learning Dayo's language," Renbochin explained from behind. The Empress nodded her head. As the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall, you naturally need to be literate. If those fellows in the imperial court could do the same, it would save her a lot of trouble. "How's your learning?" The Empress picked up the piece of paper with Renbochin's scrawled handwriting and looked at it. Renbochin's handwriting made her reminisce. When she was 3 years old, her handwriting should be like this too. It should be better than this. "In another 2 months, I should be able to read most of the words," Renbochin replied. He was talking about reading, not writing. Even though he had to write every word a few times, it was to deepen his memory. He would forget most of it in no time. Writing still had to be practiced slowly in the future. The Empress nodded her head and didn't say anything else. She continued to lead the entourage in. Renbochin carefully followed behind and went straight to the 2nd floor. After being here for so many days, this was the first time he went up to the 2nd floor. What surprised him the most was that there was actually an old lady with white hair and a beard in an official's robe guarding the 2nd floor. He had never seen her come down during these few days. He also didn't hear any sound from upstairs and thought that there was no one here. "Greetings, Your Majesty. What books are you looking for?" The old woman stood up and smiled at the Empress. "Supervisor Lin, how's your health recently?" the Empress asked. "I'm fine. It's been a long time since I've had my old illness." Ahem. Supervisor Lin coughed lightly after she finished speaking. Renbochin looked at him with disdain and said, "You're still pretending, keep pretending. I've been here for so long, yet you haven't moved at all like a ghost. You're already coughing the moment the Empress comes." But his surname is Lin. Could Lin Chaola be her daughter or granddaughter? One is a librarian, and the other is a librarian. Are they preparing for their daughter to inherit the family inheritance? Ren Bachin glanced at Lin Chaola. On the other side, the Empress said warmly, Supervisor Lin, you still have to take care of your health. Xange, send 3 tails of red snake seed and 5 stalks of 100-core grass from the medicine storehouse in a while. Yes. I'm here to look for the record of Dongxian. I suddenly feel like flipping through it, the Empress said. I'm going to get it for Her Majesty, Librarian Lin bowed and said. Then she walked toward the inside with her hunched body. I also want to see if there's anything else that I'm interested in, the Empress said again. Librarian Lin stopped in her tracks and made a please gesture. Ren Bachin looked at the Empress moving forward again. He didn't know whether he should follow her or not. Seeing that the others had already left, he followed behind. Speaking of which, he was also very curious about the difference between the books on the 2nd floor and the 1st floor. According to common sense, the books on the 2nd floor should be more precious than the ones on the 1st floor. The 2nd floor was also filled with rooms. Every room was about the same size as the one below. However, one couldn't see what was inside. There was a layer of soft paper between the grids on the door, and nothing could be seen inside. Your Majesty, it's here. When they reached the 3rd last door, Librarian Lin stopped in her tracks and pushed open the door beside her. The Empress went in, followed by Librarian Lin. After that, Xange stood at the door. Ren Bachin didn't even see what was inside. At the same time, he was even more curious. It was so well guarded. What exactly was inside? The record of Dongxian. A martial arts secret manual of this world. Ren Bachin felt that it was highly possible. This name didn't sound as common as 300 poems of the Tang dynasty. Furthermore, the Empress's martial arts was so high that it was reasonable for her to read martial arts secret manuals. Ren Bachin stood obediently at the door. Occasionally, he raised his head and looked around, wondering when the Empress would come out. Coincidentally, he saw Lin Chaola not far away from him. He immediately grinned and almost laughed out loud. He saw Lin Chaola standing there, swaying, and her eyes were already closed. An ordinary person would never think that she was actually asleep just by looking at the extent of her swaying. This kind of ability to sleep while standing definitely wasn't something an ordinary person could compare with. Ren Bachin had to admit that the temptation of the white rabbit creamy candy was indeed not small. It actually made Lin Chaola take time out of her busy sleep to teach Ren Bachin how to read. For a person who could sleep while standing here waiting for her superior, an ordinary person definitely wouldn't know how much she craved sleep. Perhaps lying in bed and sleeping till the end of time was the best ending for her. Bang! Ren Bachin looked up and indeed, Lin Chaola's head had knocked into the wooden wall beside her. He lowered his head and made a laughing gesture. Not only him, but Qing Yuan and Hong Wan also covered their mouths and laughed softly. It seemed that the two of them already knew about Lin Chaola's situation. What happened? The Empress's voice came from inside the room. Nothing, I accidentally knocked into the wall. Lin Chaola covered her head and quickly answered. She was angry for a long time before she rubbed her head and put her hand down. Not long after, she started to sway again. Ren Bachin thought for a while and felt that Lin Chaola might be sick. He remembered seeing on the news that there was a girl who had a strange illness and could only sleep 18 to 20 hours a day. She couldn't even work normally. Lin Chaola might be this kind of person. However, her illness wasn't as serious as the other parties. Only those who had nothing to do would feel sleepy and unable to resist it. Usually, she would still be able to wake up if there was a sound. Or if there was something to do, she could still force herself to stay awake. After waiting for a while, the door opened again. The Empress and Librarian Lin walked out one after another. The moment the two of them came out, Lin Chaola quickly widened her eyes as if she was glaring at someone. Soon after, she slowly calmed down and yawned. Renbochin took a glance and saw the Empress coming out with 2 books in her hands. She glanced at Renbochin indifferently and asked him to stand up straight. After sending the Empress out of the hall, Renbochin and Lin Chaola returned to the hall. Librarian Lin didn't come down from upstairs and only sent them to the staircase. "Are you really that sleepy?" Renbochin asked Lin Chaola curiously. A normal person could only sleep 8 hours a day. Even if they slept too much, they couldn't fall asleep even if they wanted to. He really couldn't understand how the other party could sleep so much. "I'm all right," Lin Chaola said listlessly as she lay on the table. Looking at her appearance, Renbochin felt that it was rather amusing. He casually threw a piece of Dove chocolate on the table. "Try it, it's on you." Just as the chocolate flew out, Lin Chaola caught it in her hands like an invisible hand. After removing the wrapper, Lin Chaola carefully took a bite. Then, like a hamster, she ate it in 2 or 3 bites and looked at Renbochin with sparkling eyes. Renbochin had a kind smile on his face. He thought that if he made chocolate-flavored feces, she would really eat it. A gentleman's revenge is never too late. Chapter 71. Renbochin did not learn for long before the Imperial Guard named Exange brought the medicine to the 2nd floor. After she came down, she pointed at Renbochin and said, "Follow me to see Her Majesty." He pushed the pen and paper to the side, got up, and followed Exange. Behind him, Lin Chaola was fuming as she looked at his back view. After snorting twice, she reluctantly put away the pen and paper. For the sake of Renbochin's white rabbit creamy candies every day. The familiar path was the same palace that he always went to. After entering, he found that a burly man in an official uniform was already standing inside. However, it was a little different from his own. The main body was black with a beast pattern on it, and the collar was yellow. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Renbochin stopped 1 step behind that person and bowed. That burly man turned his head to look at Renbochin and asked with a grin, "Your Majesty, is this the guy?" "This is the storyteller of Qingxin Palace Hall. This time, he will accompany you in receiving those people." The cold voice of the Empress came from above. "That's good. I think those people are already very annoyed. All of them don't have much ability and are a bunch of fart. If it weren't for the fact that they came to give gifts, they would have already cut off their heads and kicked them like a ball." The big man laughed loudly. "Renbochin, this is the Honglu Vice Minister. From tomorrow onwards, you can report to him. You don't have to go to Qingxin Palace Hall for the time being. As for the position, it would be in the Honglu Bureau. Gu Daxiong, are there any vacant positions?" The Empress asked from above. It had to be said that Gu Daxiong really lived up to his name. He looked like a bear, with a huge body and a face full of stubble, like a human bear. Renbochin lowered his head. He knew about the Honglu Bureau, which was responsible for external reception and various etiquettes. It was equivalent to a foreign affairs department. Since he was responsible for the reception of those people, it was perfectly justifiable for him to have his name in this department. Honglu junior official Gu Daxiong pondered for a moment before suggesting, "Why not we take up the position of Honglu deputy? I remember that seat isn't empty, right?" The Empress asked. "I'll go back and give him a vacation. Anyway, he wants to quit long ago." Gu Daxiong grinned. Renbochin was speechless as he listened from the side. There was actually such an operation. What an eye-opener. He's called Qiji. I remember that he broke the legs of 4 people from the Yun nation last year, and one of them even complained to me. So be it. The Empress's voice was heard, and both of them bowed in agreement. How about this, if there's nothing else, you can leave. After the Empress finished speaking lazily, Qing Yuan, who was at the side, served a plate of grapes. The Empress plucked one and placed it in her mouth. This subject shall take his leave." After Gu Daxiong finished speaking, he retreated. Before he left, he grinned at Rinpochen, revealing a mouthful of snow-white teeth that glistened under the illumination of the lights in the hall. "Come forward and continue your story." The Empress reclined on the couch. Her eyes were painted red, and her lips were as red as blood. When she plucked a grape and placed it in her mouth, her actions were extremely moving and made one's heart tremble. Rinpochen hurriedly lowered his head after taking a glance. He was so close to sticking his head into the ground. "Oh. Storyteller Ren, raise your head and look straight at me. Why are you lowering your head?" The Empress chuckled, looking languid and unrestrained. Rinpochen raised his head to take a glance and almost lowered his head again. Normally, the Empress was still fine. Even though she was beautiful, she was too cold and could only be observed from afar. However, today, she was lying on the couch, wearing a red muslin, looking languid and charming. Her posture as she gently placed the grape in her mouth made him feel like he was being teased. He coughed awkwardly and said, "Your Majesty's beauty is unparalleled in the world, like the bright sun in the sky. I feel ashamed of my inferiority and find it hard to look straight at you." "Unparalleled in the world?" the Empress asked. "Yes, no one in the world can compare to you." Rinpochen lowered his head and replied. "The celebrities on Earth were seen on TV every day. In terms of appearance, they were similar, but their identities were different. This was the monarch of a nation." That kind of excitement made Rinpochen's heart jump up and down. If he were to jump any further, his heart would jump out. "You really know how to talk," the Empress said with a smile. "Tell me about investiture of the gods. The story of your nation is indeed interesting." "Yes." Rinpochen hurriedly responded. He opened his mouth for a long time and finally calmed himself down before he began to narrate the story. He only stopped when he reached the part where Bai Gan dug out his heart. According to usual practice, he should have stopped at this time. The lamp oil in the hall had been refilled several times. "Tell me another part." "I don't feel comfortable if I stop here," the Empress suddenly said. Rinpochen didn't expect the Empress to speak at this time. Today, the Empress was much more human than usual and less cold. He hurriedly nodded his head in response. Fortunately, he had completed Investiture of the Gods. If he were to read those web novels where chapters were missing, he would probably be in trouble. He narrated until Grand Tutor One went to the East Sea to quell the chaos. Finally, he said, "If you want to know the outcome, listen to the next chapter." After finishing the story in one breath, he felt refreshed and could finally get off work. Then, he wanted to give himself a slap. Did he really think of himself as a storyteller? What he was doing was just a matter of missing chapters. Sure enough, these were all passed down from generation to generation. Those web novels were just copying the wisdom of the ancient people. He looked up at the Empress and saw her squinting at him. She had no intention of speaking. Rinpochen continued to narrate until Ji Chang went to fetch Chong City. The Empress then stood up and said, "It's late, you can go now. For the next few days, just prepare for the Honglu Bureau. Also, make a few trips to the Imperial Kitchen when you are free. Teach them a few Chinese dishes for the banquet." Rinpochen bowed and asked, "Your Majesty, how are the arrangements for the banquet? What does Your Majesty want?" "What do you mean?" The Empress was slightly puzzled. "In China, there are delicious dishes of color and fragrance. There are also some dishes that taste good but aren't in good condition, making it hard for people to eat. There are also some dishes that are only suitable for specific people, for example, especially spicy dishes," Rinpochen said softly. This was what he suddenly thought of after the Empress spoke. The Empress didn't like those people. She even wanted him to be the vanguard to criticize them. Whether they could eat the banquet would depend on the mood of the Empress in front of him. Renbochin felt that he was getting better at playing the role of a lackey. This is interesting. The Empress laughed. Let's see who it is. But have you prepared the toffee? It's ready. Shall I send it to the palace tomorrow? Renbochin quickly asked. No need. You go ahead with other matters. I will get someone to fetch it tomorrow morning. Renbochin bowed and took his leave. After leaving the palace, Renbochin recalled what happened just now and felt that he was a little too bold. He actually recklessly guessed the Empress's intentions and even pointed it out. But it didn't look too bad. Chapter 72. Early the next morning, Renbochin was awakened by a knock on his door. When he opened the door, he saw a delicate face. It was actually Qing Yuan. She was standing outside the door with 2 guards nearby. His toes were still teasing Tian Tian and Gun Gun, who were rolling around on the side. Greetings, Miss Qing Yuan. Renbochin cupped his hands in greeting. He didn't know what to call it either. After all, the people in the imperial palace in ancient China were all eunuchs, so it was easier to address them. But those movies and television dramas didn't mention how to address the palace maids. He reckoned that Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were definitely of a higher grade than him. He thought for a moment and decided to just call her Mississippi. In any case, even if it was wrong, the other party wouldn't be able to find anything wrong with it. Qing Yuan stood up and smiled. When she saw Renbochin, she wasn't unfamiliar with him. After all, she saw him every day. Furthermore, as the Empress's person, she was clear about some of the Empress's thoughts. She knew that Renbochin might be put in an important position in the future. After all, he knew a lot of things and could speak well. He was a talent. Storyteller Ren, where's the thing for Her Majesty? Qing Yuan laughed. Renbochin hurriedly returned to the house, took out the bag, and handed it to Qing Yuan. At the same time, he stuffed a small bag that weighed about half a kilo into her hands. Here they are. Other than milk candies, there are other things. They were specially prepared for Your Majesty. As for this, it's for Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan, Renbochin said. He had just packed the bag when he went back, and there were still some bags left in the house after going back and forth a few times. With Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan's status, they probably didn't lack money. Maids and female officials weren't as eager to make money as eunuchs, especially with their status. I might as well put half a caddy of White Rabbit creamy candies in it. This thing can be used as a stepping stone in the palace. Currently, it has been successful. Qing Yuan's eyes curved. No wonder His Majesty thinks so highly of him. He is indeed an exquisite person. Thank you for your praise. I don't deserve it. Renbochin cupped his hands in obeisance. In that case, I shall not disturb you any further. Her Majesty is still waiting in the palace. Qing Yuan waved a small bag at Renbochin before turning around and leaving. Not long after, he handed the bag for His Majesty to the Imperial Guard and held the small bag behind his back. Looking up at the sky, he estimated that it was about 7 o'clock. Renbochin suddenly felt that he should get the watch back. At least he could look at the time. If this thing was sold, it should be able to fetch a high price, but the source of the goods was hard to say. Even though the Empress knew some things about him, he couldn't let others suspect him anymore. After all, she was the ruler of a nation and the 7th most powerful expert in the world. Her magnanimity was far beyond that of an ordinary person. Other people might not be as broad-minded as the Empress. If someone wanted to know his secret, he would be in trouble. It was better to get the mechanical blueprint of the clock and find someone to make it. More sophisticated processing equipment was not difficult to obtain. At most, he would wear one watch and give one to the Empress. He went to the kitchen and took a look around. When he saw that there was vegetable soup, he scooped a bowl of it and ate it together with some other grains. After that, he changed his clothes and brought Tinghulu and Tai Dao to the Honglu Bureau. The Honglu Bureau was located in the Pearl Curtain district, not far from the Beihong district. Along the way, they did not encounter any fights. However, when they arrived at the Pearl Curtain district, they met a few people from the Public Order Bureau who were pushing a few badly battered people. It seemed like they were going to be whipped for fighting. One of the burly men from the Public Order Bureau was slightly stunned when he saw Renbachien. Following which, he sized him up carefully, called out to the others and walked towards Renbachien. Renbachien? Renbachien smiled bitterly and nodded his head. Needless to say, he was definitely one of the 8 people who were beaten up by Caretaker Shi. Did you give the thing to that bastard Shi Wanshan? That burly man's face immediately became unfriendly. I was robbed, I'm innocent. Renbachien said helplessly. Can you use the secret treasure of your sect? Lend it to me. Otherwise, let's draw a circle, that burly man shouted. Renbachien felt Tinghulu and Tai Dao behind him take a step forward. He was satisfied. It was worth it to have these 2 underlings. In any case, it was enough for them to stand up for him when he was in trouble. He waved his hand behind him. Now that I'm the Honglu deputy, I can choose not to accept your challenge. Renbachien smiled casually. According to his understanding, the Honglu deputy should have a higher position than this burly man. He could choose not to accept the challenge just because his position was higher. It was fine if he was bullied by the Empress, but Caretaker Shi was on good terms with him. Renbachien couldn't bully everyone. There's such a thing. That bastard Shi Wanshan didn't mention it before. Aren't you from the Beast Park? That burly man scratched his head in confusion. Renbachien cupped his hands and said, I'm about to report to the Honglu deputy. You are the first outsider to take up an official position in Dayo. Forget it, your position is higher than mine. That burly man looked at Renbachien and grinned. He didn't seem to mind at all, waved his hand at him and left. Renbachien looked at his back and shook his head slightly. This person wasn't bad. He was similar to the aboriginal men that Renbachien had met before, but a little vulgar. However, from his attitude, Renbachien could tell that if he didn't have an official position in Dayo, it would be difficult for him to do anything. The aboriginals weren't polite to outsiders. He shouldn't even think about being a wealthy man. Unless he went to another country, but it wouldn't necessarily be a good outcome. Therefore, it was better to cozy up to the Empress in the future. Based on his experience in the Beast Park and the palace, the Dayo people weren't averse to becoming one of their own after holding a position or official position. Regardless of whether it was Caretaker Shi or a few other caretakers, or even the odd job workers and their family members, they were all the same. It was the same for some of the people he met in the palace. Let's go. Renbachien gestured for the 2 people behind him to head to the Honglu deputy. Outside the Honglu deputy was a huge courtyard with a few tall buildings. From the main gate, one could see that there was a passageway leading to the back of the building. The 2 burly men at the entrance were dressed differently from the palace guards and the people from the Public Order Bureau that Renbachien had seen just now. It was a sleeveless shirt, revealing 2 thick, muscular arms. In addition, the 2 of them had ferocious faces and murderous eyes, which made it impossible for strangers to approach them. If one didn't know better, they would have thought that they were in prison. In a normal diplomatic department, wouldn't they find a few good-natured people who were easy to deal with? However, Dayo had specially placed 2 fiendish-looking men to guard the entrance. They couldn't wait to keep everyone out. They were simply a weirdo in the diplomatic department. This is the Honglu deputy. What's the matter? One of them stopped Renbachien and said fiercely. Look for Gu Shaoqing. Tell him that Renbachien is here to report, Renbachien said. Report? That person sized up Rinpoche suspiciously. Wait a minute. The other person turned and entered the courtyard. Rinpoche felt that he should have worn his official robes. Originally, he thought that there was no need to wear the official robes of the palace since he was here to report to the Honglu deputy. He didn't expect that there would be trouble everywhere. Previously, he didn't feel it when he was walking in the city. Today, he really felt it. Not long after, that person came out and said, "Go in, Sir Gu is waiting for you." Chapter 73. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he was greeted by a burly man with bell-like eyes and short stubble. He grabbed Rinpoche's shoulder and asked, "Are you Rinpoche?" Rinpoche nodded. "I will depend on you in the future." The burly man grabbed Rinpoche's shoulders and shook him back and forth. For some reason, Rinpoche felt that these words were like a dying wish. Then, the burly man laughed out loud. "I finally don't have to deal with those bastards. I want to pinch them to death every time." Looking at his ecstatic expression, it was as if he had been sentenced to at least 3 years and was suddenly released. Rinpoche looked at him with bright eyes. Needless to say, this was the former Honglu deputy, the one who broke the legs of 4 people and was reported. Rinpoche was curious. Was it so painful to deal with foreigners in the Honglu bureau? That burly man laughed wildly for a long time before patting Rinpoche's shoulder and saying, "Boss Gu is waiting for you at the back. Turn right from here to the biggest house." Then, he threw his head back and laughed out loud. Rinpoche followed the direction he pointed and passed through the first row of buildings. There was a row of slightly shorter buildings at the back, and the door of the largest building on the right was open. "Sir Gu." Rinpoche got the 2 of them to stay where they were and shouted as he walked to the door. Gu Daxiong was sitting behind a desk. The desk was empty except for 2 big feet. It was different from an ordinary office. There was nothing on the desk. "Come in." Gu Daxiong raised his head and waved at Rinpoche. "Did you see Qi Ji? You should have met him before." Rinpoche felt that they were talking about the burly man from just now. "Yes, he ran away. From now on, you will be in charge until the group of people leave after His Majesty's birthday celebration. All I ask is that they don't bother me, and you can do whatever you want. If you don't like him, just beat him up. Just don't kill him." Gu Daxiong casually threw a token on the table. Rinpoche was speechless as he took the token. "Go find Gu Shou and get a set of official robes to alter first. If you see that there's nothing to do in the courtyard, take away the servants and use them. Just one thing, don't let them bother me," Gu Daxiong grinned and reiterated. Rinpoche could only nod. It seemed like he was really throwing everything to him this time. The officials of Deo were indeed different from the flirtatious and cheap people of other places. "Sir Gu, when exactly is Her Majesty's birthday celebration? How much longer until then?" Rinpoche cupped his hands and asked. "There are still 22 days left." He reckoned that someone would come in the next 2 days. Some of them will stay in the residences of the envoys from other countries, while others will be arranged by them. The rest will be up to you. Where are they arranged? Rinpoche asked again. There had to be a place for them to be arranged. Find Gu Shou, he will tell you where to go, Gu Daxiong said. If anything happens to them, or if there's any trouble, if they deserve to be beaten, then beat them up. They were the ones who insisted on coming over. No one begged them to come over. Gu Daxiong interrupted Rinpoche. When Rinpoche saw this, he felt that it was better to wait and see. Sir Gu, one last question. What if the opponent is an expert? With my skills, I can't beat anyone, Rinpoche finally asked. If he was beaten up by someone else, he would definitely be buried by the Empress. Gu Daxiong looked at Rinpoche suspiciously. Even though Rinpoche's physique was a little thin and weak, and he didn't look like he could fight, but Her Majesty actually arranged for a weakling to come over. In any case, Rinpoche was the storyteller of Qingshin Palace Hall, and that old lady was very powerful. Wait. After finishing his sentence, Gu Daxiong stood up and walked towards the door. When he passed by Rinpoche, he swung his arm and almost flipped Rinpoche over. Why don't you have any strength at all? Gu Daxiong turned his head and looked at Rinpoche doubtfully. Rinpoche was pushed back a few steps. Looking at Gu Daxiong's innocent and doubtful face, he could only sigh. Gu Daxiong walked to the door and shouted, "Xiong Pai, get your ass over here." This shout was really earth-shattering, and the Honglu Bureau was immediately thrown into chaos. "Boss, he's here, he's here." A loud voice came from afar. When the person appeared at the door, Rinpoche immediately felt as if a wall had suddenly appeared in front of the door. Even half of the light outside the door was blocked, and the room became dark in an instant. The person who appeared at the door was a burly man who was more than 2 meters tall. He was bald, bare-chested, and wore a pair of cloth pants. His entire body was bulging with muscles, and there were many scratches on his body that looked like those left by wild beasts. Gu Daxiong's physique was like that of a bear, but the person outside was taller and stronger than him. Xiong Pai were the largest of their kind, and the person at the door really lived up to his name. Compared to him, Caretaker Shi was not much stronger than a chicken. "Xiong Pai, this is the newly appointed deputy. You will follow him for the next few days, and beat up whoever he tells you to beat up." "Oh, greetings, deputy." Su Dali cupped his hands towards Rinpoche. His voice was a little muffled, and he seemed a little silly. Rinpoche walked to Gu Daxiong's side and compared the difference in their physiques. Gu Daxiong's arms were almost as thick as his waist. Just by standing there, he was like King Kong, giving people a huge sense of oppression. Especially when looking at the scars on his body from such a close distance, Rinpoche felt that his entire body was emitting a fierce aura. If a hatchet man was to be graded based on his appearance, Rinpoche felt that he could be given a score of 9. He gave off 1 mark because he was afraid that Xiong Pai would become arrogant. As long as his strength is not at the heaven rank, no one can defeat him. Gu Daxiong hammered his chest twice, producing a thumping sound. Xiong Pai revealed a simple and honest smile, and there were still shreds of meat in the gaps between his teeth. Was heaven rank the division of strength in this world? Rinpoche did not know whether it was heaven rank, man rank, heaven rank, heaven rank, heaven rank, or upwards ho. In any case, heaven rank should be very powerful, and he did not know what rank the Empress was at. Rinpoche cupped his hands and "Thank you, Sir Gu. It's all right. Looking at your small physique, he will follow you for the next few days." Gu Daxiong waved his hands. "Then where should I look for Gu Shou?" "The house at the very end." Gu Daxiong pointed to the left side of the main door. "Thank you, then I will take my leave." Rinpoche walked out of the door, and Xiong Pai followed him. Rinpoche turned his head and looked at Xiong Pai. Xiong Pai was much taller than him, and he had to raise his head to look at Xiong Pai's face. When Xiong Pai walked, Rinpoche could feel the tremors under his feet. "I will have to take care of you for the next few days. Everyone has to complete the tasks given by the higher-ups," Rinpoche said to Xiong Pai. "Deputy, I will beat up whoever you tell me to." Xiong Pai grinned and gave a simple and honest smile. Yes, it sounded crude, but the logic was not crude. That was exactly what he meant. Rinpoche nodded his head in satisfaction and went to the room at the very end to look for Gu Shou. After entering, he realized that Gu Daxiong was 1 size smaller. Even his actions were exactly the same. He was sitting on a chair, and both his legs were directly placed on the table. Chapter 74. Goose show through an official robe to Renbochin. If it was worn by someone else, it might be just right or slightly loose, but if it was worn by Renbochin, it would be unsightly. He held it in his hands and prepared to find a tailor shop to change it. Originally, Tinghulu and Tai Dao were his two bodyguards. Now, with Xiong Pai, they were nothing. Standing in front of Xiong Pai, one would have to look up to him. Although Tinghulu and Tai Dao were not small, they were only about 1.75 meters tall, similar to Renbochin. It was just that their bodies were much more muscular and weighed at least 100 kilograms. But compared to Xiong Pai, they were as thin and weak as chicks. Renbochin pressed on Xiong Pai's arm. It was as if it was made of steel. "Sir Ren, this is?" the two asked. "This is Xiong Pai. He will be following me for the next few days. Both of you can go back first," Renbochin said. "Deal with those animal hides as soon as possible. I still need them." The two nodded their heads. They were originally from the Beast Park. They followed Renbochin every day because it was easy for something to happen when Renbochin went out alone. With Xiong Pai by his side, the two of them had nothing to worry about. "What do you usually do in the division?" Renbochin asked Xiong Pai after the two of them left. "Drink, sleep, and practice martial arts." Xiong Pai grinned. "Practice martial arts? What do you practice?" Renbochin asked with interest. "Deputy, you will know when you come." Xiong Pai led Renbochin around the row of houses. There was a field at the back. At this moment, there were 5 or 6 people there. A few of them were practicing martial arts. Their movements were very fast and powerful. There was also someone lifting a stone block. It was the kind that weighed 100 kilograms. He raised it horizontally and put it down again and again. When Renbochin arrived, he saw that the other party was sweating profusely. He had done more than 30 stone blocks in a row and was still the same. Renbochin did not know how many stone blocks he had done. "What do you usually do?" Renbochin asked. He was curious about Xiong Pai's strength. After all, there were not many people with such a physique in Dayo. Although physique did not represent strength, Gu Daxiong had specially asked Xiong Pai to follow him. Presumably, Xiong Pai's strength was top-notch. "My lord, please watch from the side, lest you get hurt." Xiong Pai grinned and walked to the side. There was a big stone that was 1 meter square. He directly hugged it with both hands and shouted loudly. He lifted the huge stone up to his eyebrows and slowly put it down. Then, he raised it again and put it down again. Renbochin, who was standing at the side, opened his mouth and was almost stunned by him. One had to know that a 1 meter square stone weighed 2 to 3 tons, and he lifted it just like that. Moreover, he raised and lowered it several times. Finally, with a loud shout, he directly threw the stone over his head, throwing it 2 to 3 meters high. "Damn!" Renbochin couldn't help but speak. If it landed like that, an ordinary person would have been smashed into a meat patty. It would be easier for Renbochin to accept if he were to toss 200 to 150 kilograms into the air. But this was 2 to 3 tons, almost the weight of a car. Xiong Pai, on the other hand, caught it calmly and steadily. He only pressed his legs down a little to cushion the impact. Then, he threw the stone up again and caught it again. When Xiong Pai threw the stone for fun, the other player couldn't play anymore. He got a stone that weighed 100 or 200 kilograms, but Xiong Pai got a stone that was 20 times the size. How could he play? It was embarrassing. "All right, stop." Renbochin hurriedly shouted. Looking at Xiong Pai's training movements made him a little dizzy. His heart was trembling and he always felt that if he missed, a freshly made pizza would appear in front of him. If Xiong Pai were to dye his entire body green, he could become the Hulk. Wouldn't it attract suspicion? Upon hearing Rinpoche's shout, Xiong Pai immediately turned around and walked away. He didn't even catch the stone and smashed it on the ground, causing the entire ground to tremble. Let's go and change your official uniform first. Rinpoche looked at Xiong Pai in front of him. Even after throwing a 2 to 3 ton stone a few times, he didn't even break a sweat. After bringing Xiong Pai out, Rinpoche felt that he didn't have to worry about being hit by people when he walked. With such a guy behind him, no one would be blind enough to bump into him. Xiong Pai's physique was rather terrifying for the people of Dayo. He was the kind that would attract sidelong glances wherever he went. Julian district basically had more yamen offices and very few residences and shops. Rinpoche directly brought Xiong Pai to Gujiazhai district. There were more residences there and it should be easier to find a shop for changing clothes. Just as he entered the main street of Gujiazhai, he saw a shaved ice shop at the side. There were many people sitting inside and they were all there to avoid the summer heat and eat shaved ice. This was still in the morning. If it was in the afternoon, there would be more people. Qingshan. Rinpoche went in and shouted. Sai, Sir Ren. Shi Qingshan raised his head and shouted. The dust on the roof beam kept falling. Lower your voice, don't be so loud. Rinpoche rubbed his ears and said, Give me 2 bowls of shaved ice, any fruit. Then, he found an empty table and sat down. Sit here. Rinpoche patted the stool beside him. Xiong Pai shook his head and said, I'd better not sit. Sit, I said so. Rinpoche insisted. There was no reason for him to stand while he was sitting. He still needed his protection from now on. Seeing that Rinpoche insisted, Xiong Pai slowly sat down. Crack. The long stool immediately broke. Xiong Pai got into a horse stance, stood up, and scratched his head. I'd better stand. Rinpoche was speechless. It seemed like Xiong Pai had broken 1 or 2 stools from sitting and was already experienced. Looking at Xiong Pai's physique, Rinpoche called out to Shi Qingshan, Give me another bowl of shaved ice. When the 3 bowls of shaved ice were served, Rinpoche picked the color that suited him the best and pushed the other 2 bowls to Xiong Pai. This is for you. Don't eat too quickly. Along the way, he felt that Xiong Pai was a little silly and was somewhat similar to Tong Jia. Rinpoche was only halfway through his meal when he looked up and saw that Xiong Pai had already finished 2 bowls. He was still licking his lips and had a satisfied look on his face. This is cooling. Xiong Pai laughed foolishly. Rinpoche quickly finished his bowl and looked up to call out to Shi Qingshan, Qingshan, where do you find clothes changing? Walk 300 steps forward and there will be one in the alley next to it. Let's go. Rinpoche called out and brought Xiong Pai to the location that Shi Qingshan pointed out. Indeed, they saw an alley that turned right. It was only 2 meters wide and there were wooden houses at the side. After walking for a while, they didn't see a single signboard. Brother, can I ask where the clothes changing shop is? Rinpoche called out to a burly man who had just come out of the house to pour some water. You have walked past it. That's the one. That man took a glance at Rinpoche and then looked at Xiong Pai, who was behind him. He stretched out his hand and pointed. Rinpoche turned around and saw that the man was pointing at the 3rd door at the entrance of the alley. Thanks, brother. Rinpoche laughed, turned around, and entered the house with Xiong Pai. Chapter 75. Rinpoche stayed in the Honglu Bureau for 2 days and more or less understood the people and rules there. During this period, he found out that Xiong Pai lived in a courtyard not far from the Honglu Bureau. Those outsiders were usually arranged to stay there. Pai loitered around the courtyard and could definitely play a role in stabilizing the situation. During this period, Renbochin made a trip back to Earth. When he came back, he took 300 song poems and sat in the Honglu bureau. When he had nothing to do, he would recite song poems. At least, he had nothing to do and was still in a state of idleness. Pai followed Renbochin wherever he went. When Renbochin was reciting song poems, Pai would immediately sit on the ground and start snoring. Renbochin wished he could stuff socks into Pai's mouth. Deputy, someone's here. On the afternoon of his first day back from Earth, Renbochin was pondering how to stuff Pai's mouth when a loud voice came from outside. Who's that? Renbochin couldn't react for a moment. He said he's called Mr. Emptiness. The person who came in was one of the guards at the entrance. His name was Qi Xing. He came from the same village as the original deputy Qi Ji. There was another guard called Qi Heng who was also at the entrance. Mr. Emptiness. Renbochin immediately reacted. These were the people who came to celebrate the Empress's birthday. Pai, get up and follow me to take a look. Renbochin kicked Pai's waist twice. It felt like he was kicking a rock. He brought the sleepy Pai to the entrance and saw 4 pretty young ladies in colorful clothes carrying a palanquin. When the 4 ladies saw him, they grabbed a handful of flower petals from their waist pockets and scattered them into the sky. Who's coming? Renbochin stood at the entrance and looked at this scene. He had a bad premonition. Mr. Emptiness has arrived, the young lady in front shouted delicately and scattered another handful of flower petals. Please follow me in to register. Leave the palanquin outside. Renbochin looked at her awkwardly. What was she trying to do? Cough, cough. A series of coughing sounds came from within the palanquin. Soon after, the curtain was lifted, and a young man wearing a silver silk robe walked out. His face was covered with a layer of powder, and his lips were green. His appearance was passable, but this sickly posture that seemed like it would be blown away by a gust of wind was no longer just a sign of emptiness, it was clearly a sign of kidney deficiency. Young master kidney deficiency, right? Follow me. With his hands behind his back, Renbochin turned around and walked in expressionlessly. Cough, cough. It's young master emptiness, young master emptiness. Young master emptiness quickly explained. I'm just joking, Mr. Emptiness. Renbochin didn't even turn his head. Cough, cough, cough. Mr. Emptiness coughed again. A strange look flashed across his eyes. However, when he saw that Pai was staring at him expressionlessly, the strange look in his eyes gradually disappeared. He coughed and followed behind Pai. Do you have a travel pass? Renbochin asked. I lost it. Foreigners who came to Dayo would definitely need a travel permit from the border. Needless to say, there was no such thing. Thinking about it, it made sense. The people who came to the Empress's birthday celebration had all kinds of backgrounds. There was no guarantee that some of them would simply ignore the law. This kind of thing happened quite often in previous years. Renbochin had also heard about it 2 days ago. Renbochin brought Mr. Emptiness back to the deputy's room. He immediately took out a pen and paper from the shelf at the side and placed them on the table. Name, birthplace, origin, position, whether accommodation has been arranged, and the purpose of your visit. Please write down all these. If you are here to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday, it will be sent to Her Majesty. Renbochin sat behind the table after he finished speaking. Cough, cough, how should I address you? Mr. Emptiness covered his mouth and asked. Honglu Deputy, my surname is Renbochin said indifferently. Mr. Emptiness stood in front of the table and wrote something on the paper. Following which, with a flick of his wrist, the paper turned into a white shadow and flew towards Renbochen's chest. Bang! Before the paper could fly past the table, it was pressed down by a big hand. In the next moment, the entire table was smashed into pieces by his palm. Xiongpai crushed the table with one hand and stared fixedly at Mr. Emptiness. He gave off the feeling that he was a wild beast that was ready to pounce. Mr. Emptiness had no doubt that as long as Renbocchen opened his mouth, this beast-like burly man would immediately pounce on him. The feeling that this burly man gave him was that he was extremely dangerous. Renbochen's expression did not change, but his palms were a little sweaty. A surge of anger was rising in his chest. The people in this world would really start a fight whenever there was a disagreement. He originally thought that only the aboriginals were like this. It seemed that the people from other countries were not any better. Of course, this Mr. Emptiness was definitely not an ordinary person. Attacking a deputy. Do you think I should kill you or bury you? Renbocchen looked straight at him and sneered. Sorry, I just threw it casually. If he did not make a move, it would have slowed down when it reached the deputy. Even an ordinary person could easily catch it. I did not expect this to cause such a misunderstanding. Cough, cough. Mr. Emptiness revealed an apologetic smile. If anything happens again, you will be buried under Lawn City, Renbocchen continued coldly. You damaged a table, a piece of Honglu Bureau's special paper, and a compensation of 100 taels of silver. Mr. Emptiness took out a few golden leaves from his waist and lightly threw them to Xiongpai. Or rather, they should be called golden leaves. They were like books with 10 pages and could be taken apart for use. I don't have a place to stay. I'm afraid I will have to trouble you to arrange it for me, Mr. Emptiness said. Renbocchen rummaged through the ground. That piece of paper was only left with fragments. Before that, I have to fill it in again. Renbocchen stood up and found another piece of paper from the cabinet beside him. This time, Mr. Emptiness could only place the paper on the wall and write. He coughed a few times while writing. Renbocchen felt that there seemed to be some problems with his lungs. He did not know if it was because of his training or because of this. I have finished writing. Mr. Emptiness passed the paper to Renbocchen. Renbocchen glanced at it. This Mr. Emptiness's surname was Zhao. He could recognize 2 words from his name, but there was one that he did not recognize. He was from Great Xiao's XX Zhao family. He also did not recognize the name of the place. He placed the paper on a shelf and pressed a piece of wood on it. I will bring you to the place where you will stay. Renbocchen walked in front with Xiongpai. Mr. Emptiness left the Honglu Bureau and got on a sedan chair and followed behind. After walking for a short distance, they arrived at a courtyard. They were all individual courtyards, and each courtyard had 4 rooms. One of them was the kitchen, one was the master bedroom, and the other 2 were for the attendants. The courtyard was divided into 3 rows. The first row faced the main street, and Renbocchen arranged for Mr. Emptiness to stay there. He was the first to arrive, so naturally, the place was the best. Mr. Emptiness was satisfied with this position. After getting off the sedan chair, he cupped his hands and thanked Renbocchen. In a while, someone will send you a sign to prove that you are staying in this courtyard, Renbocchen said to him. You can make your own arrangements. There are bedding and whatnot inside. Cough cough, thank you very much, Deputy Ren. Mr. Emptiness coughed violently after finishing his sentence. The handkerchief covering his mouth was dyed red. I shall not disturb you anymore. Renbocchen saw that he was coughing up blood and hurriedly left. Could it be that he was suffering from tuberculosis? It was better to stay away from him. After leaving the courtyard, Renbocchen turned back to take a look. It was the Empress's birthday celebration. Why did a sickly person like him come all the way here? But these people were really ruthless. If he did not have Xiong Pai by his side to protect him, he would have been in trouble. What did he mean by slowing down when he was in front of him? Who was he trying to fool? To be able to throw a piece of soft paper like a dart, what kind of technique did he have? This was only the first person, and he did not know what kind of people would come after him. He was afraid that this task would be more troublesome than what he had originally thought. If there were many of these people, it would be difficult to deal with them without using force to suppress them. Chapter 76. Renbochin strolled back with Xiong Pai. He deeply felt that this job might not be as easy as he had previously thought. Just the fact that Mr. Emptiness's palanquin was carried by the 4 young ladies who were able to carry the palanquin all the way to Lawn City showed that they were definitely not ordinary people. He fiddled with the golden page in his hand. It really looked like a pocket-sized golden book. Taking a closer look, he realized that there were words carved on each page. It was a pity that he couldn't understand what was written. Just as he returned to the entrance of the Honglu Bureau, he saw a young man wearing a dirty robe and carrying a book on his back. He was talking to Qi Heng and Qi Xing. It was the kind that Ning Kaichen carried in a Chinese ghost story. It was used to store the 4 books and 5 classics. There was a piece protruding from the top to block the sun during the day and also to block the rain during the rain. No one knew what they were talking about, but Qi Xing suddenly took a step forward, scaring the young man so much that he almost fell to the ground. "What's going on?" Renbochin asked as he approached. "Deputy." Both of them turned around and greeted him with cupped hands. "This is..." "He said he came to celebrate His Majesty's birthday," Qi Hing said. Renbochin sized him up. That young man was about 16 or 17 years old and had a tender face. Renbochin didn't know what kind of family would actually allow him to cross the border and come to Deo. His body was a little dirty. He didn't know how long it had been since he last bathed. His robe was covered in dust. "Are you the deputy here?" the young man asked curiously. Renbochin nodded. "I am." "What, you don't look like one." The young man nodded honestly. "It doesn't look like it. You will be beaten for being so honest." Renbochin looked at him from the corner of his eyes. I'm sorry. I meant that you don't look like someone from Deo," the young man quickly said. "You came by yourself?" "Yes," the young man said. "Come in with me and register yourself." Renbochin waved his hand and walked into the courtyard with his hands behind his back. "How should I address you?" Renbochin asked casually. "Surname Ning, given name Kaichen." "Ning Kaichen." Renbochin suddenly turned his head to look at Ning Kaichen. His neck almost turned 180 degrees, scaring Ning Kaichen, who was behind him. "Sir, it's Ning Kaichen, what's wrong? Is Xiao Qian doing well?" Renbochin put on a fake smile and didn't know what to think. "I've just met young Master Kidney Deficiency, and now there's Ning Kaichen. This world is really a coincidence, and it's a small one. Who is little Qian?" Ning Kaichen was at a loss. "Perhaps you will meet them in the future," Renbochin said. When he returned to the room, it was still a mess. The broken table lay on the floor, and there were many broken pieces scattered around. Fill in this form. Name, place of origin, background, position, whether accommodation has been arranged, and the purpose of your visit. Renbochin passed the paper to him and pointed to the windowsill. It didn't take long for Renbochin to receive the paper from Ning Kaichen. He scanned through the paper and saw that it was from Great Xia. After putting the paper away, she brought him to his residence. Along the way, Renbochin inquired about the happenings along the way. He was very curious about everything in the outside world. At the mention of this, Ning Kaichen couldn't stop talking. He was in high spirits as he recounted his experiences. Along the way, he described it as though Tang Sing went on a pilgrimage for 81 hardships. Sir, there's something you don't know. One day, I was camping in the deep mountains. A huge bird covered the sky and covered the sun. When it flapped its wings, it almost blew me off the mountain. Later on, I hugged an old tree that was hundreds of years old and saved my life. At that time, my heart almost jumped out of my chest. I didn't expect such an exaggerated thing to exist in this world. It was really an eye-opener. When I return, I will definitely draw this thing and let the world know about it. Another time, I was camping in an ancient temple. In the middle of the night, a young lady suddenly came to seek shelter. She said that she missed the right time to travel in the mountains. I shared half of my rations with her. Later on, she said that she wanted me to rest at her house for a day to thank her. At that time, I thought that I was indeed a little tired from traveling for a few days. Since her house wasn't far away, I thought of going to her house to rest for a day. Later on, when I woke up, there wasn't any luxurious house. Instead, there was an ancient tomb around it. Another time, I met a group of robbers. When they saw that I had nothing on me, they kidnapped me and brought me to the mountain. The king of the mountain was actually a woman. She was 16 years old, unmarried, and as beautiful as a flower. When they saw that I was a scholar and that I was fair, they wanted to marry me. Later on, I pretended to agree and ran away while they were preparing for the wedding banquet. Now that I think about it, it's really sad. Renbochin was dumbfounded by Ning Caichen's bluff. He had to admit that Ning Caichen was more suitable for storytelling than him. Even though Ning Caichen looked immature and weak, he was a veteran in bragging. Renbochin felt that if he didn't have such outstanding bragging skills, he might not have been able to arrive at Lan City unscathed. It was a short journey from the Honglu Bureau to his residence. At the very least, Renbochin felt that he couldn't bear not to take care of him after listening to his words and the hardships he went through along the way. He didn't even want the beautiful female king of the 28 mountain village just to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday. This kind intention was really touching. Renbochin brought him to his residence. It was a courtyard that was connected to Mr. Emptiness's. You can stay here for the time being, Renbochin said. Thank you very much, Deputy. I can't thank you enough, Ning Caichen said. He felt a little regretful that he couldn't continue to brag. I'm just doing my job. If there's anything, you can look for me at the Honglu Bureau. If I'm not around, look for someone else, Renbochin instructed. After all, he didn't look like he was very good at fighting. Of course, this was hard to say. After all, he had traveled a long way to get here. Bragging skills alone might not always be useful. This Ning Caichen might be an expert in disguising himself as a pig to eat a tiger. Renbochin waved his hand at Ning Caichen and brought Xiongpai back. When he passed by the courtyard where Mr. Emptiness lived, he took a glance inside. The sedan chair was still there, but he didn't see the 4 women who were carrying it. They should be in the house. After returning to the Honglu Bureau, he didn't encounter anything else. He sat there and recited the song Ci until the sky turned dark. When he estimated that it was about time, he sent Xiongpai back and strolled to the Qin medicine shop alone. Now that he was wearing his official uniform, he wouldn't encounter any trouble walking on the streets. Previously, he mentioned that as long as he wore this uniform, it would represent that he was an official of Dayo. Even if he didn't look like an aboriginal, the aboriginals would still treat him as one. Being able to stroll around by himself without 2 burly bodyguards made Renbochin feel rather comfortable. There weren't many people in the Qin medicine shop. When Chen Zixing saw Renbochin, he was a little surprised and asked, Mr. Ren, are you an official in Dayo? Just a nominal position in the Honglu Bureau. Renbochin smiled. You are wearing a secondary class, rank 6 official uniform. It shouldn't be as simple as a nominal position. Chen Zixing laughed. Ren Baqian knew that the Honglu Bureau's deputy was a primary class, rank 6 official. However, seeing that Chen Zixing could tell at a glance, Ren Baqian asked him about the differences between official uniforms. Every rank of official had a different uniform. I've learned a lot. Ren Baqian cupped his hands in obeisance. He only knew a little about these things that everyone in Dayo, especially in Lan City, knew about. Chapter 77. After reading various treatises on typhoid and diseases to Chen Zixing for an hour, Ren Baqian left the Qin family's shop, strolled around the streets, and found a 2-story restaurant. He wanted to see how the food here tasted. After being here for so many days, he had always eaten in the Beast Park and had not had the opportunity to eat outside. Ren Baqian saw that there were quite a lot of people inside. When he entered, it was quiet inside. There were a few bald burly men at each table, and all of them looked over. There were also a few heroic-looking women. They were all ordinary aboriginals. If an ordinary person encountered such a scene, his legs would probably go soft. Imagine if you entered a restaurant and all the people inside were 200 to 300 kilograms of burly men. Moreover, all of them were bald and looked at you fiercely. Most people would just turn around and leave. Ren Baqian had seen a lot of such scenes in Dayo these days. He was somewhat used to it and did not mind. When the others saw the official robe that he was wearing, they all turned around and acted as if nothing had happened. They ate the meat in big mouthfuls, chatted loudly, and were extraordinarily lively. Ren Baqian found a table in the corner and sat down. The lights in front of him dimmed and a burly man appeared in front of him. "Sir, what do you want to eat?" Ren Baqian tilted his head and looked at the other party. The tone and expression of the other party did not seem to be asking him what he wanted to eat, but more like asking him how he wanted to die. Ren Baqian sighed. With regards to these people, he felt helpless. Would it kill him to smile? "What's your specialty?" "Sir, we are good at everything here." "As long as one has eaten it, no one would say that it's not delicious," the burly man immediately replied. Ren Baqian sighed again. In his ears, the meaning of the burly man's words was, no one would dare to say that it's not delicious. "Give me 2 of your specialty dishes and a pot of wine," Ren Baqian said. "All right." The expression and tone of the burly man finally became more lively. He shouted to the back, 2 specialty dishes and a pot of wine. While Ren Baqian waited for the dishes, he listened to the conversations around him. He did not need to listen to them. The loud voices of the Dayo people made it impossible for him to not listen to them. They talked about how grains and noodles were expensive nowadays, which stronghold had a fight with another stronghold, which stronghold had injured a few people during hunting, and which family's wife had severely injured a man. They were no different from ordinary citizens in China. At most, they were a little more boorish, bad-tempered, fierce-looking, stronger, more powerful, and would pick a fight with others whenever they had nothing to do. Ren Baqian felt that there was still quite a big difference between them, but in essence, they were pretty much the same. Of course, there were also those who scolded the merchants of various countries, saying that salt and cloth were expensive, and that they didn't even pay much for furs. Ren Baqian suddenly felt that the world had become a lot more lively after listening to these family gossip. Life was supposed to be like this. Full of family trifles, haggling over every ounce. It was not like the palace that he entered and exited every day, which was quiet, cold, and solemn. Not long after, the dishes were served. It was a plate of steamed mutton and a plate of sauce. It was unknown what was used to make the sauce, but it was a little spicy. However, it covered up a lot of the mutton's odor. It tasted pretty good. The other plate was a stewed fish. It was very simple, with only salt and something similar to ginger. However, the fish was tender and tasty. The wine was relatively inferior. It tasted bland and was very turbid. Renbochin sat there and listened to the bustle around him. He unhurriedly ate half of the dishes and drank all the wine. He actually felt a little tipsy. "Shopkeeper, bill please," Renbochin shouted. "Sir, 80 copper coins." That burly man appeared in front of Renbochin again. Renbochin took out a piece of silver and threw it on the table. "Keep the change." "Thank you, sir." The burly man grinned. His facial expression became even more ferocious, but Renbochin felt that he was more pleasing to the eye. He got up and left the restaurant. Renbochin strolled toward the direction of the palace as if he was taking a stroll. Before he reached the palace, he heard a loud noise in front of him, followed by loud laughter. What happened again? Renbochin was curious and quickened his pace. When he was about to reach the plaza, he finally saw the scene in front of him clearly. The surroundings were dark, but the plaza in front of the palace was brightly lit. He saw more than 20 soldiers standing in a circle with torches in their hands. In the middle were 2 men and a woman. Opposite the 3 of them was a burly man holding a long saber. He wore leather armor on his chest and left shoulder. The laughter came from the burly man holding the long saber. As for the 2 men and the woman opposite him, the 2 men were using long swords while the woman was using a pair of short sabers. The 3 of them obviously couldn't care less about the surrounding soldiers. All their attention was focused on the burly man in front of them. "Hand over Long Wanli's corpse." "You have already killed him. Why won't you let us take his corpse away? We just want to bring his corpse back." The woman shouted angrily. Come. Let me test your skills. If you can withstand 10 moves from me, I will let you leave. If you can kill me, I will let you take my corpse away. I guarantee that no one will seek revenge on you. If you can't withstand 10 moves from me, you will also be buried here. The burly man held the saber and laughed wildly. "Do you mean what you say? Who are you?" One of the men looked around at the surrounding soldiers and shouted. "I'm the left guard commander of the palace, Shan Wanshui." "Remember this name well," the burly man shouted. "As for the 3 of you, report your names to me after you survive." The 3 of them looked at each other. It was already difficult enough to deal with more than 20 soldiers around them, not to mention the middle guard commander in front of them. There was only one path in front of the 3 of them: kill this middle guard commander or withstand 10 moves from him. Otherwise, they would definitely die tonight. Renbochin saw everything clearly from afar and sighed in his heart. Why did they have to come all the way here to deliver their heads? Wasn't it good to be alive? Why did they have to die? Let's see if you, the middle guard commander, are really that powerful. One of the men shouted and pounced towards Shan Wanshui. There was a flash of light in the air like a flower blooming. Showy but impractical. Shan Wanshui laughed and didn't make any other moves. He held the end of his saber and swung it over. There was only a brilliant saber gleam in the air. Sword shadows and flowers were all cut down. That man was shocked and quickly placed his sword in front of his chest. Clang! The sword broke with a sound. Zi Tao! The other man and woman shouted angrily and pounced towards Shan Wanshui. There was a rain of blood in the air. That man was split into 2 halves. As the 2 halves of the corpse fell to the ground, blood and internal organs spilled all over. Renbochin felt disgusted looking at it from afar. It was really too disgusting. However, the people who came this time were really too weak. With this standard, they still dared to snatch Long Wanli's corpse in front of Dayo's palace. This confirmed Renbochin's opinion that they really came all the way here to deliver their heads. Fortunately, there were 3 of them. If there were 2 more, Shan Wanshui could have killed 5 people tonight. As for Shan Wanshui, he swept his saber horizontally at the two people who pounced on him. His movements were incomparably swift. The saber gleam reflected the flames like lightning and disappeared in a flash. The two people knew that they couldn't withstand it and dodged. Third move. Shan Wanshui shouted. He held his saber and chopped at the man who was closest to him, smashing a stone slab on the ground into pieces. Fourth move. The hilt of the saber moved toward the woman who was thrusting her twin short sabers. The moment the twin sabers came in contact with the lady, she felt a jolt in her arms. There was a sharp pain in the area between her thumb and forefinger, and the twin sabers were bounced off. Chapter 78. Hong Xian. The remaining man howled in grief. "I'll fight you to the death," he roared. His entire body transformed into a shooting star as he charged towards Shan Wanshui with his sword. His posture was similar to Long Wanli's, but his aura was far inferior. A ray of light flashed past. The burly man stood up with his sword in hand, only 6 moves. He then burst out laughing. The burly man's attacks weren't as flashy as the others. Every move was powerful and fast as lightning, but the others couldn't even parry. "The commander is mighty." Cheers could be heard from the sidelines. The deaths of the 3 men did not cause any ripples in the hearts of the others. They were already used to it. Renbaqian looked on helplessly as the 3 men died without a complete corpse in the blink of an eye. One man was split in half from the middle, one at the waist, and the last man was split diagonally from shoulder to waist. Fresh blood and internal organs splattered all over the ground. Such a cruel scene sent chills down Renbaqian's spine. At the same time, his stomach was in turmoil. The last time Long Wanli challenged the Empress, he was beaten into the ground with just 1 move. By the time he was able to move after being poked by Caretaker Shi's electric baton, the square had already started to fill in the holes. In addition, both sides used a sword and a palm to determine the victor. Renbaqian couldn't see the duel clearly and only saw Long Wanli's back view. Even though he felt it was a pity that Long Wanli was dead, Renbaqian was more excited to see a duel between 2 experts. At this moment, what Renbaqian saw was a bloody massacre. The shock he received and the feeling of barbarism and bloodshed were far greater than the previous time. It could even be said that it was something he had never felt before in his life. He always felt that death was far away from him. Even though he almost lost his head when he first arrived in this world, he managed to survive in the end. This made him, who rarely saw death, feel a sense of alienation from it. However, it was different this time. The brutal massacre was happening in front of him. It made him realize that this world was far crueler than what he had always seen. Just as Renbaqian stood there with his mind blank, the soldiers at the side of the field had already started to clean up. They dug a hole under the broken stone slab and threw the severed limbs into it. Then, they started to fill the hole with soil. Not long after, the entire hole was filled up. All that was left was for the stonemason to install another stone slab. It wasn't until those soldiers left that the onlookers dispersed, leaving only Renbaqian standing there with ice-cold hands and feet. After a long time, Renbaqian dragged his heavy footsteps back to the Beast Park. Gun and Tian had already fallen asleep on the stone slab. Renbaqian's head was in a mess as images kept flashing through his mind. Suddenly, the horrifying scene of him being decapitated like the other 3 flashed across his mind. That scene made him feel suffocated, and he abruptly sat up on the bed. That one move made him break out in a cold sweat. No matter what, I can't become like that, like those 3 people, Renbaqian muttered to himself. This isn't Earth, it's a different world. It's not as safe as Earth, and human lives aren't that precious. In the future, I can't just laze around like this. I have to work harder and take the initiative to climb up. Only when my position is so high that others can't move will I be safe. The higher my position, the stronger my importance, the safer I will be, and the further away I will be from the threat of death. I have the backing of a civilized world that is far superior to this place. How can I continue to be muddle-headed and put my life in the hands of others? If it's possible, I want to become stronger too. Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Renbochen's mind. Finally, they merged into one. He wanted to become stronger, have a higher position, and make himself safer. Only then would he be able to survive in this world. Even though he had such thoughts in the past, they were never as clear, firm, and real as they were now. As a youth who often had fantasies and an ordinary person, the sudden revelation of another side of this world shattered the muddle-headedness that he had been muddle-headed all this while. He felt that the things that he had been working hard and doing in the past were really too little. It was far from enough. Especially after he had gotten rid of the crisis of survival and gained a foothold, he actually began to relax. He had underestimated this world. After tossing and turning for a long time, he finally fell into a deep sleep. Early the next morning, he was woken up by a knock on his door. He didn't sleep well that night. Even after he fell asleep, everything that happened at the scene would surface in his mind from time to time, forming a dream. When he woke up, he realized that he was drenched in sweat. He picked up a bowl of water and gulped it down. Renbocchen got up and pushed open the door. He saw Caretaker Sher outside. "Why is your face so pale?" Caretaker Sher looked at Renbocchen and asked curiously. "Maybe I caught a cold last night. Your small physique is too weak." Caretaker Sher laughed boorishly. "The Imperial Kitchen asked you to visit them when you were free." Renbocchen nodded. "I got it. I will go after I finish my work at the Honglu Bureau today. Brother Ren, you can arrange for me to come over." Caretaker Sher waved his hand and left. Renbocchen looked at Caretaker Sher's back as he left. Caretaker Sher still treated him the same as before, but he felt that something was different. It was because his state of mind was different. The Aboriginals had a warm side, a straightforward and adorable side, but also a cruel side. This was what he felt just now. After washing up, he picked up his official robe. This was what he relied on to survive. After putting on his robe, he left the Beast Park. When he passed by the plaza, he could still smell the lingering smell of blood in the air. However, he didn't show any signs of abnormality. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, he picked up the book 300 Song Poems and continued to memorize it. After a while, he felt tired and went to the backyard to watch some people from the Honglu Bureau practice martial arts. Xiong Pai was still playing with that rock that weighed 2 to 3 tons. No one came to the Honglu Bureau for the whole day. Mr. Emptiness and Ning Kaichin, who arrived earlier, didn't have anything to do. Renbocchen was happy to stay in his room. In the afternoon, he reckoned that it was almost time. He bade farewell and went straight to the Imperial Kitchen. When Renbocchen arrived, the Imperial Kitchen had just delivered dinner to the Empress. Everyone was sitting there resting. When they saw Renbocchen, they greeted him one after another. "Brother Ren." The greetings of Brother Ren. Renbocchen smiled and asked, "Where's Caretaker go?" "He went to deliver dinner to Her Majesty." Looking at the time, "He should be back soon," someone immediately replied. Renbocchen nodded his head. "Are you looking for me because of Her Majesty's birthday banquet?" "Brother Ren, it's like this. Caretaker Go hopes that you can participate in making some dishes. After all, we have just familiarized ourselves with your spices. Now that Her Majesty's birthday banquet is just around the corner, we don't have time to slowly experiment." Renbocchen nodded his head, found a place to sit down, and waited for Caretaker Go to return. Not long after, Caretaker Go came back and saw Renbocchen. His face twitched for a long time and he called out, "Brother Ren. Forget it, call me Storyteller Ren in the future. This is my current position in the palace." Renbochin waved his hand and said, "Seeing that you are in a difficult position, I won't make things difficult for you." Chapter 79. Renbochin tilted his head and looked at him. "Then why did you look like you were eating tea just now?" "Up to you." Renbochin shrugged. "Brother Ren, the dishes for Her Majesty's birthday banquet." Caretaker Go called out again. This time, he was much more straightforward. It seemed like the hurdle in his heart had been overcome. "Make two, one normal and one unorthodox. Let's see if those people are to Her Majesty's liking. If Her Majesty is happy, we won't torture them. If Her Majesty is unhappy, they can forget about having a good meal," Renbochin said. Upon hearing Renbochin's words, everyone in the imperial kitchen laughed. "How are the arrangements for the banquet? How many people to a table? How many dishes?" Renbochin asked again. "A table for two, 6 dishes, and a bowl of soup for each person. Her Majesty said that this year's banquet will be different from previous years," Caretaker Go said. Renbochin nodded his head. This wasn't much. It was simply too easy to come up with 6 main dishes from the Chinese menu. Any birthday banquet or wedding banquet would have at least a dozen dishes. Meatballs, for happiness meatballs, twice cooked pork, and so on. He was sure that the tongues of those who came would be swallowed. Renbochin stayed in the imperial kitchen until midnight. He first picked 8 dishes and let the imperial kitchen chefs practice making them. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and make them into the menu. As for the other menu, Renbochin was prepared to go back and study the dark cuisine. When the time came, he just had to pick 6 dishes and 1 soup. If he chose this, Renbochin was confident that he would definitely give those who came this time an unforgettable experience. A rather unforgettable kind. He guaranteed that they would come back to the banquet next year after eating their fill. The following morning, Renbochin was listening to Ning Kaichen brag. It seemed that he realized that Renbochin was the only one who could listen to him after going 1 round yesterday. Early in the morning, he came over not long after Renbochin arrived and told Renbochin the legendary stories of his journey. Renbochin was very interested in many of the things he talked about. For example, the local conditions and customs of various places. In the morning, a large group of carriages entered Lan City. The convoy first stopped at a location on Jingyang Street. There were 3 shops there, and all of them were sealed with seals on their doors. The signboard above said Wanjiao Lu. A man with a mustache and wearing a purple silk robe came down from the carriage. With his hands behind his back, he raised his head and looked at the 3 sealed shops. "Third uncle, is this our family business in Lan City?" A man came down from the other 2 carriages. They were both in their 20s, one handsome and the other handsome. "Not bad. Your third uncle and the others are all in prison. This time, we came for this matter," the man called 5th uncle said. "These barbarians," one of the valiant-looking young men said indignantly, his face filled with anger. "Silence. This isn't our home. Remember, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. If something happens to you here, no one can save you." The middle-aged man frowned. "I know I was wrong." The valiant man quickly lowered his head and said, "You 2 know what we're going to do this time, right?" the middle-aged man asked. "I know. But 5th uncle, is that Qi Zixiao really as beautiful as a flower?" the handsome young man asked. "Not just that. When I came to Dayo in the past, I saw her from afar. She was an exceptional beauty. I brought you 2 here just in case. Don't think too much about it." There are a lot of talented young men with the same idea in every country. Now, the Yun nation's imperial court is in chaos. That man alone holds power and rejects dissidents. The undercurrent is surging, and we have no choice but to find a place to retreat. There are many wealthy families in Great Xia. Even though we have already made arrangements, it won't be easy to gain a foothold. I was the one who strongly advocated for Deo. Deo doesn't lack brave generals and warriors, but it lacks capable people who can govern the country. Even though the current Empress of Deo is a young woman, her breadth of mind is far from that of an ordinary person. If the two of you could display your talents and interest her, you might be able to gain a foothold in Deo. Unfortunately, even though your third uncle has been managing the business for many years, he is greedy by nature. Not only did he lose himself, but he also lost the business here. The reputation of the Zhang family has also been ruined by him. This time, we are here mainly to salvage the situation here. As for the rest, it's fine as long as you know it. There's no need to force it. Got it, fifth uncle. We believe what you said. In our family, fifth uncle's foresight and knowledge are incomparable to others. We are well aware of it. However, there is a little doubt. If we stay here and people find out, I'm afraid we won't be able to explain to our family, the handsome young man said after they looked at each other. You don't have to worry too much about this. I found 2 people early on who are enough to impersonate you in the family. As long as you live in seclusion, you don't have to worry about being discovered. Even if people find out about your situation here, it's just a coincidence that you have the same name and looks. The family can still settle this matter. Let's go to the Honglu Bureau. The middle-aged man waved his hand at them and ended the conversation. After they returned to the car, their hearts weren't calm. They knew what the middle-aged man meant. He wanted them to find an official position here. Even though they didn't like this barren land, they had no other choice for the sake of their family. However, they were curious about Qi Zixiao, whom the middle-aged man called an exceptional beauty. They wanted to see what the Empress of Deo, who was praised so highly by their fifth uncle, looked like. The carriage arrived at the Honglu Bureau. A moment later, Ren Baqian received the news and went out with Xiong Pai. At a glance, he saw the 3 people standing at the entrance and the carriage a little further away. In the middle was a middle-aged man with an elegant face and a mustache. The 2 youths behind him were extremely good-looking. They are here to use their beauty trap. Ren Baqian thought to himself when he saw the 2 of them. They are trying to snatch my food. I have to suppress them even without Her Majesty's orders. The other party was stunned when they saw him. This Honglu deputy wasn't an aboriginal, nor was he a remnant citizen of the Hao nation. He looked more like someone from Great Xia or the Yun nation. This meant that someone was 1 step ahead of them. This thought emerged in the minds of the few of them. How do I address the few of you? Where are you from? Why are you here? Ren Baqian asked calmly. He was neither indifferent nor enthusiastic. I'm Zhang Junzheng. These 2 are from the same family, Zhang Heqi and Zhang Heju. They know that Her Majesty's birthday is in a few days, so they specially brought gifts from the Yun nation. May I know how to address you, sir? My surname is Ren Baqian. You can also call me Deputy Ren. Ren Baqian smiled politely. Sir Ren, that's a good name. The Kuinping spreads its wings for 8,000 miles and will definitely soar to the top. Zhang Heju, the handsome youth, praised. Chapter 80. How long has Sir Ren been in the Honglu Bureau? I've been to Lan City before, but this is the first time I've seen a foreigner serving as an official in Deo. It's obvious that Her Majesty favors Sir Ren, which is admirable, Zhang Junjing said with a smile as he followed Ren Baqian into the Honglu Bureau with his 2 nephews. I've only been in this position for a short while. Renbochin waved his hand. This matter couldn't be kept a secret, and anyone would find out after asking around. Oh. Zhang Juanjing's eyes flashed. I'll have to trouble you to fill out this form. Renbochin took out 3 pieces of paper and handed it to the 3 nephews. After telling them what he needed, he sat behind the table and quietly observed them. Zhang Junjing was the leader among them, but this time, the main characters were probably the other 2 gigolos. Where do you want to stay? Do you have a place to stay? Renbochin asked after seeing them finish writing. I'll have to trouble sir to arrange it. Zhang Junjing cupped his hands. Xiong Pai, bring them to the 2 courtyards beside Ning Kaichin, Renbochin instructed. All right, deputy. Come with me, Xiong Pai shouted at the few of them. Thank you, sir. Zhang Junjing and the other 2 nephews cupped their hands. Renbochin nodded and fell into deep thought after they left. These people looked like they came from big clans. They were different from ordinary people and had a sense of propriety in their words and actions. Even though they had always treated him with courtesy, Renbochin didn't have a good impression of them. It was entirely due to the changes in his mentality over the past 2 days that made him feel a sense of crisis. At the same time, he was also thinking about a problem. Now that he was an official in Dayo, what about the people from other nations? Could they? There weren't any in the past, but that didn't mean that there wouldn't be any in the future. In the afternoon, 2 groups of people arrived one after another. One group was from Great Xia and had the surname Lien. The other group was also from the Yun nation and had the surname Hong. Like the Zhang family, these 2 groups of people came in a long line with carriages and horses. They also brought a lot of goods or gifts. Renbochin asked Xiong Pai to bring them over. When Xiong Pai returned, he muttered, "Sir, those bastards don't know what's good for them. They actually complain that the conditions are too simple and crude. They're all like this. In my opinion, it's already not bad, but they're still complaining about this and that." Renbochin squinted his eyes slightly. He knew that Xiong Pai was talking about the people from the Lien family who had just been sent over. From the young master of the Lien family to the servants, all of them had an arrogant look on their faces, especially that young master of the Lien family. His eyeballs were almost on top of his head. Next time, let them find their own accommodation, Renbochin said casually. That night, Renbochin handed over the task to someone else and returned to Earth. For the past 3 days, he had been studying and thinking in his room. His mind was completely focused on that world. There were too many aspects to consider. In the past, he was like a spinning top that would only spin once the rope was pulled. Other than saving his own life, his other thoughts were only to create something that existed on Earth or how to earn money. He had never systematically considered what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. However, during these 3 days on Earth, he had figured out his future path. What he was good at was nothing more than relying on the Earth and being famous in the world. As for other aspects, needless to say, he reckoned that no one in Dayo above the age of 10 was weaker than him. As for intellect, he was just an ordinary person with no foresight or wisdom. All he had was the technology, culture, and various theoretical knowledge that had been developed on Earth. This was the only thing that he could show that would make people value him. Even though the individual strength in this world was very strong, they were far from being strong enough to ignore technology. Technology was also very important to them, and culture and various theories were equally important to Dayo. In the past, he was thinking of doing something to earn some money and please the Empress. But now, it seemed that those were just small things. If he wanted people to value him, he had to systematically improve the various aspects of Dayo's technology and academic knowledge. Only in this way could his position not be shaken by anything and not be affected by anything. Of course, cozying up to the Empress was indispensable. In this world, he knew nothing, had nothing, and had no foundation at all. In this short period of time, only by cozying up to the Empress would he be safe and sound and be able to do things that could show his value. Ranbaqian thought about it a lot. Even though there were still some flaws and it wasn't very comprehensive, he already had a clear goal. The rest could only be slowly perfected in the future. When he returned to that world again, his eyes were clear and he completely knew what to do and how to do it. Brother Ren, you seem a little different today, Caretaker Sure said curiously when he saw Ranbaqian in the morning. I have figured out some things that I have never understood, Ranbaqian said with a smile. If you can't figure it out, just throw it aside. When the time comes, you will know what to do, Caretaker Sure said indifferently, causing Ranbaqian to smile. When he arrived at the Honglu Bureau, Qi Heng and Qi Xing were still standing at the entrance. When they saw him, they greeted him one after another. Did anyone come yesterday? Ranbaqian asked casually. There was a group of carriages and a group of 3 people riding on horses. I saw Xiong Pai bringing them away. It should have been arranged, Qi Heng replied. Ranbaqian nodded his head to indicate that he understood. When he entered the deputy's room, a burly man was sitting behind the table with a sluggish look on his face. If he drooled, he would be a living retard. Ranbaqian patted the table. Official Registrar Shi. That burly man quivered. When he saw that it was Ranbaqian, he hurriedly stood up and said, Deputy Ren, you are back. Have you settled the matter? Yes, Ranbaqian said faintly. Did anything happen yesterday? This person was the official registrar of the Honglu Bureau. Ranbaqian asked him to make the arrangements yesterday. The reason was very easy to find. The Empress was arranging other matters. In any case, it was impossible for him to confront the Empress. The Empress also knew that he would disappear once every few days. 2 groups of people came yesterday. I have arranged for them to go over, that burly man said. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave. Thank you very much. Ranbaqian revealed a smile. The burly man grinned at Ranbaqian. Without saying anything else, he immediately left the house. Ranbaqian walked 1 round in the house and then came to the backyard. Sure enough, Xiong Pai was playing with that huge rock there. When he saw Ranbaqian, he hurriedly threw the huge rock like a rubber ball and ran over. You continue with your training. I will take a look here, Ranbaqian said as he felt the huge rock landing on the ground. In the afternoon, when Ranbaqian and Xiong Pai were staying in the room, a low-ranking official who was usually in charge of the affairs at the Honglu Bureau's courier station ran over to report, Sir, there is a fight over there. However, there wasn't much panic on his face. It seemed that he was just here to inform Ranbaqian about this matter. In any case, they were all from abroad. As long as they didn't damage the courier station, the people from the Honglu Bureau wouldn't care at all. Ranbaqian leaned back and asked, Did they kill anyone? Sir, they weren't when I came. That person laughed. At this moment, Deputy Ren's manner of speaking was very similar to Deputy Qi Ji in the past. What happened? Ranbaqian then asked. I am not too sure either. In any case, they quarreled for a while before fighting, that person said. Which courtyard? Courtyard number 2 and 8. Ranbaqian thought for a while. It was Mr. Emptiness and the people from the Lien family from Great Xia. Chapter 81. Ranbaqian brought Xiong Pai and the burly man named Gong Gu out of the Honglu Bureau. His footsteps were not hurried and it was as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. However, his mind was thinking about how to resolve this matter. After all, they were here to deliver gifts to the Empress. If they couldn't resolve this matter properly in a private fight, it would make them look incompetent and cause more trouble. The Honglu Bureau wasn't far from the post house. They just had to walk around the corner to get there. From afar, Renbochin could see a group of people surrounding the place and could even hear their cheers. The group of burly men outside were mostly Dayo people. At this moment, they had turned into a crowd of onlookers, cheering and applauding one after another. However, when Renbochin got closer, he also saw a few familiar figures. For example, Ning Caichen's petite figure was squeezing through the crowd. After spending a long time trying to squeeze through the crowd, Ning Caichen was suddenly pushed back 5 or 6 steps and fell on his butt. Ning Caichen cursed his bad luck after he got up. He realized that he couldn't squeeze through the crowd, so he jumped outside the crowd like a spring. When Renbochin came over, he saw this scene. Suddenly, he inexplicably thought of the time when he watched Long Wanli challenge the Empress. Wasn't it the same as Ning Caichen? A feeling of empathy arose in his heart. The aboriginals were too much of a bully. Ning Caichen jumped, but he could only see a small part of the fight. This made him extremely anxious. He loved watching such a big show the most. Why was he late for such a big show? At this moment, he felt someone pat him on the back. He quickly turned his head and saw Xiongpai's wall-like figure. Soon after, he saw Renbochin looking at him with an embarrassed expression on his face. Xiongpai's body was like a wall. Ning Caichen didn't feel embarrassed at all. When he saw Renbochin, he quickly pulled him and said, "Deputy Ren, there is a fight going on inside. I don't know if their brains are smashed. Quickly go in and see what's going on." Renbochin looked at Ning Caichen and pondered. You can't wait for their brains to be smashed, right? You really can't judge a book by its cover. Xiongpai. Renbochin turned his head and called out to Xiongpai. Xiongpai immediately understood. He stretched his arms forward, picked up the 2 people in front of Renbochin, and placed them to the side. The 2 of them felt themselves being lifted into the air. They immediately turned their heads and wanted to curse, but when they saw Xiongpai's figure, they glared at him instead. With Xiongpai clearing the way, it was much easier for Renbochin to get in. Ning Caichen, who was behind him, hurriedly followed behind. He blindly followed Renbochin's every step for fear that he would be squeezed out again. By the time there were no more people in front of him, Renbochin had already entered the innermost circle and was able to see the scene clearly. The one who attacked was not Mr. Emptiness, as he had expected. He was coughing up blood at the side. 4 delicate girls were circling around a black-clothed old man, throwing punches and palms at him. Although the black-clothed old man wasn't injured, he was trapped and unable to break out. Those 4 ladies were naturally the ones who carried the sedan. Upon seeing this scene, Renbochin was finally sure that they weren't hired. This thought had been going around in his mind for a few days. Today, he was finally able to confirm it. As for the black-clothed old man, he was an old butler of the Lien family. He had extraordinary skills, and if it weren't for the tacit cooperation of these 4 ladies, it would have been difficult to trap him. However, they were only able to trap him. Mr. Lien Baoqing, who was at the back, was watching the fight with a fierce look on his face. He wasn't happy that he couldn't deal with these ladies even after such a long time. At this moment, someone beside him said something. He looked up and immediately saw Xiongpai's huge figure. If this barbarian was here, then the deputy would definitely be here as well. A ruthless look flashed across Lien Baoqing's face. Lien Baoqing, beat them to death. Everyone in the crowd immediately heard this sentence. A few beautiful ladies actually wanted to beat them to death. How vicious and merciless. When Renbochin heard this, he was stunned. He looked to the opposite side and saw that Lien Baoqing had just shifted his gaze to the side as if he didn't see Renbochin. However, Renbochin clearly saw Lien Baoqing shifting his gaze away from him. With Xiongpai's huge figure, it was impossible for him not to see it. When Renbochin thought about how Lien Baoqing had complained a few days ago, he sneered in his heart. Was he trying to humiliate him? At this moment, the situation of the battle suddenly changed. Following Lien Baoqing's shout, although Lien Cheng's aura didn't change, his moves became much more ferocious. Suddenly, a delicate cry was heard. One of the young ladies flipped backward, and a white light flashed from her abdomen to her neck. Her clothes were cut into two, and her breasts were exposed. However, a line of blood spurted out from the abdomen of that young lady. At this moment, everyone realized that there was a soft sword in Lien Baoqian's hand. Like a venomous snake, it tried to bite the other three. If this young lady hadn't dodged in time, her abdomen would have been cut open. Even now, she was still severely injured. Originally, the four young ladies could only trap Lien Baoqian, who was unarmed. Now that there was one less person and Lien Baoqian had a weapon in his hand, the situation immediately changed. The few of them were immediately surrounded by danger. In just a short while, a few more wounds appeared on their bodies. Seeing this situation, Mr. Emptiness coughed even more violently. Originally, he was using a handkerchief to cover his mouth. The handkerchief was stained with traces of blood, but now, he directly spurted out a mouthful of blood. Like a sharp arrow, it wasn't shot toward the old man in the middle of the battlefield, but directly toward Lien Baoqing's face. "Be careful, mister," someone suddenly shouted from the side. A burly man unsheathed his long saber and blocked the blood arrow. When the blood arrow hit the long saber, it immediately lost its strength and fell to the ground. Then, a scene that shocked everyone happened. The place where the blood splashed on the long saber seemed to have melted. First, it softened. Then, half of the long saber fell to the ground with a clang. Lien Baoqing was shocked by this situation. If even a steel saber was like this, he would shudder in fear if the blood were to hit him. A streak of green flashed across his face. His gaze toward Mr. Emptiness was filled with a wild, murderous intent. Ren Baoqian was also surprised. How was that blood that was spurted out? It was obviously strong acid, wasn't it? It was impossible for human blood to be corrosive. Could it be that there was also super strong gastric acid? Ren Baoqian had always heard the phrase, "I spit on you." Today, he had learned something new. If this Mr. Emptiness spat on someone's face, it wouldn't be as simple as disfigurement. Kill them, including that sickly guy. Go, kill them. I want to hack them into pieces. Lien Baoqing had a crazy look on his face. Hearing his shout, Ren Baoqian knew that this show couldn't continue. If he continued to watch, his brain would really be smashed to pieces. With a gloomy face, Ren Baoqian turned his head and said to Xiong Pai, "Stop them. If anyone dares to make a move after I shout for them to stop, kill them without mercy." This was Dao's imperial capital. If they continued to stir up trouble, he would be done for. Chapter 82. After Ren Baoqian shouted, none of the people in the field stopped, or rather, they didn't dare to stop. If they stopped and the other party didn't, they would immediately fall into a disadvantageous position. Furthermore, they simply didn't have the time to see who shouted. Xiong Pai, separate them. Those who don't listen, kill them. While Ren Baoqian was speaking with a gloomy face, Lien Baoqing was still hooting, "Kill them, I want to skin them to use as cushions for my chair. As for that sickly guy, I want to chop him into pieces." However, he was destined to fail. Xiong Pai rushed into the group of people in a few steps. With a swing of his arm, he hit a young girl in front of him. Like a kite with a broken string, she flew out of the crowd while vomiting blood. Have tender feelings for the fairer sex. Xiong Pai didn't have such a thought. In any case, he would do whatever the deputy instructed him to do. The old man in black, Lien Baoqing, saw that there was no time to lose. The flexible sword in his hand turned into a myriad of stars and went straight for the other two young girls. The two young girls shouted angrily. As they dodged the cold rays, they turned their heads to look at Xiongpai. Xiongpai directly and efficiently kicked at the old man in black. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the old man leaped into the air to avoid this kick. His flexible sword turned into a poisonous snake and went straight for Xiongpai. Regardless of whether it was for self-protection or for other reasons, he actually attacked Xiongpai. This action made Renbaqian laugh incessantly. Xiongpai let out a deep roar from his throat. This man, who had always given Renbaqian the impression of a simple and honest man, finally revealed his fangs. He simply ignored those specks of cold light, raised his hands high, and directly hammered down. Although Renbaqian used his arms to block in time, how could he withstand Xiongpai's brute force? Bang! Everyone in the field felt the ground under their feet shake. Renbaqian was smashed into the ground by Xiongpai. Liangyu, Lianqi, stop, come back. Cough, cough. Mr. Emptiness shouted. Because their sisters were sent flying, they were hesitating whether to attack Xiongpai or the seriously injured Renbaqian. Mr. Even though the two young girls knew that they were no match for Xiongpai, they still glared at him fiercely before obeying his order to retreat. Renbaqian frowned as he walked into the field. What's going on? No one answered. When the surrounding Dayo people saw a foreigner dressed in a Dayo official's uniform walking into the arena, they curiously inquired about him and found out that he was the newly appointed Honglu deputy. They continued to watch the show. Lian Baoqing looked at Lian Tong, who had half his body in the ground, and then looked at Xiongpai's huge body. After being shocked by Xiongpai's huge strength, his lips trembled for a long time. You actually dare? Oh. Dare what? Renbaqian looked at Lian Baoqing with a smile on his face. Then, he lowered his head to look at Lian Baoqing, who was already limp and unconscious. Renbaqian looked at Lian Baoqing with pity and said, what a pity. You actually attacked Xiongpai and got beaten up so badly. TSK, TSK, TSK. Renbaqian sighed. It's quite painful to live like this. Trample him to death and help him to be free. Renbaqian's words were completely different from what he had said before, and everyone immediately fell silent. Lian Baoqing, Ning Kaichen, and even the people from the Zhang and Hong clans standing at the side felt a chill down their spines. They suddenly felt that this Honglu deputy, who looked easy to bully, was actually a vicious wolf who would devour people without spitting out the bones. How dare you? How dare you? I'll kill your entire family. Lian Baoqing jumped up as if his tail had been stepped on and clamored at Renbaqian. Xiongpai had a few bloody scars on his body, but he acted as if he didn't feel them. Just by looking at the hideous scars on his body, one could guess that this kind of injury had almost no effect on him. Renbaqian grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He lifted his leg and stepped on Lian Baoqing's exposed chest. Kacha! First, Xiongpai's bones shattered. Then, like a water bag being stepped on, fresh blood spurted out from his 5 orifices. Renbaqian suppressed the disgust in his heart and revealed a calm and unruffled smile. He looked at Lian Baoqing and said, attacking an official of the Honglu Bureau in Dayo. You guys are really gutsy. Do you think there's no one capable in Dayo? Seeing Renbaqian smile, even Lian Baoqing, who had a lawless temperament, felt his heart tremble. Following which, his heart was filled with rage and endless humiliation. That's his normal reaction after being attacked. Lian Baoqing squeezed out these few words from the gaps of his teeth. Ever since he was young, he could do whatever he wanted to do. He had never been humiliated like this before. The rage in his heart was about to ignite his entire body. If it wasn't for Renbaqian's words that woke him up a little, he would have already gone crazy. Xiong Pai's reaction is also normal. He was stomped to death by your order. Lian Baoqing felt as if his heart was on fire. He felt like he was going to explode in the next moment. There must be a punishment for attacking an official, isn't there? Otherwise, if anyone did this for no reason, where would the dignity of Dao be? Ren Baoqian smiled and walked in front of Lian Baoqing. The surrounding Dao people all laughed. They felt that this Honglu Bureau deputy who looked like a foreigner was a good person and they liked him very much. This time, I'm here to participate in the birthday celebration of the Dao Emperor. I've brought a gift with me. I'll definitely report your actions to the higher-ups. My great Xiao's envoy will also inform your emperor. Lian Baoqing's face was flushed and his eyes were bloodshot. His mind was spinning quickly on how to kill this bastard in front of him. Not only did he have to die, but his entire family had to die as well. Ren Baoqian touched Lian Baoqing's cheek. This action made the surrounding people feel disgusted. Therefore, before that, you have to be careful and don't commit any more crimes. Otherwise, I'll throw you into prison and the gift you brought will still belong to Her Majesty. However, by then, you might not be the one to send it to the Emperor. As for the rest, you can do whatever you want. Ren Baoqian laughed. Ren Baoqian's words made Lian Baoqing feel as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him from head to toe. Ren Baoqian walked back to the center of the square and said, I don't care how this incident happened today. I hope that all of you and the people who will come after you know that no matter what your status is in your own country or how tyrannical you usually are, you have to remember that this is Dao. Whether you are a dragon or a tiger, you have to crouch down. I don't care if you guys fight to death outside, but don't create trouble for me here. After Ren Baoqian finished speaking, the surrounding people were dead silent. Following which, those Dao people who were watching the commotion cheered loudly. Ren Baoqian revealed a smile to the surrounding people. He softened his voice and said gently, everyone here isn't an ordinary person. Treat yourself better. If you want to make things difficult for yourself, don't do it here. Xiong Pai, let's go. Ren Baoqian snapped his fingers and walked outside. At the same time, he didn't forget to shout, Gong Gu, let the Public Order Bureau handle this matter. Yes, sir, the burly man called Gong Gu quickly replied. This Sir Ren had just been appointed not long ago. They had discussed about him in private and more or less looked down on him. After this incident, he realized that this Sir Ren was much more ruthless than what he looked like on the surface. He really liked the way Ren Baoqian handled today. Chapter 83. Ren Baoqian left the crowd. After turning a corner, his face started to turn pale and his back started to sweat profusely. He never thought that he would actually do such a thing. Even he was shocked by what he did just now and even felt that it was terrifying. Those words, that behavior, it was completely unlike what he would do. Once he returned to the Honglu Bureau, he immediately rushed to the toilet and retched. Just now, he was beside him and personally gave the order to step on a person like a cockroach. Although he deliberately did not lower his head to look at that scene, the sound was still transmitted to his ears. That final sound somewhat sounded like a persimmon being crushed. Thinking of the scene of the persimmon being crushed, he immediately vomited. After a long time, he finally came out of the toilet with a forehead full of sweat. He did not know if what he did today was right. However, he knew that he had to intimidate those people. For example, Lian Baoqing's family had a huge influence in the local area. He had been spoiled since he was young and was used to being tyrannical. If he did not intimidate him, who knew what would happen in the following days? Not only him, but the others also felt the same way. Those who came from afar were definitely not ordinary people. Among them, there were not many who were kind. Just like that Mr. Emptiness, if not for Xiong Pai by his side that day, he would have already gotten into trouble. There were about 13 days left before the Empress's birthday celebration. At this time, not many people had arrived. In a few days, there would be more people. Who knows, there might be many who had a feud with each other. Even if there was no feud, there might be conflicts because of their different styles. This was the first task that the Empress assigned to him. He absolutely could not mess it up and had to do it well, no matter what method he used. Previously, he thought that it would be enough to suppress the other party by reciting poems. Now that he thought about it, he suddenly felt that it was somewhat ridiculous. He had really thought too simply. Perhaps those people had really received more than 10 years of education, but in essence, they were not ordinary students. It was hard to say what they would do. At the same time, Renbaqian also began to think about why the Empress assigned him to do this. After thinking for a long time, he still could not figure out the main point. In any case, he should just do what that person instructed him to do. Instead of thinking about this, he might as well think about whether the gift he gave the Empress was suitable or not. Not long after Renbaqian left, the people from the Public Order Bureau arrived. At this moment, more than half of the crowd had already dispersed. Lian Baoqing left with an ashen face after Renbaqian left. He didn't even bring Lian Baoqing's corpse with him. Of course, he still had to stay in Deo for so many days. He couldn't possibly leave a corpse by his side every day. Coupled with the weather in Deo, it was estimated that the house would be uninhabitable within 2 days. Although 2 of Mr. Emptiness's subordinates were injured, it was still much better than Lian Baoqing's losing face and his right-hand man. After pacifying the 2 maids, she felt a deep fear of Renbaqian. The previous probing had made him feel that the Chamberlain of Dependency's deputy was putting on a brave front, but his actions today made him look at him in a different light. He would no longer think that way again. Not only him, but the others also felt the same way. Although the people of Deo were barbaric and overbearing in the past, that was all there was to it. It wasn't like something like today hadn't happened before, but at most, they would be whipped a few times after they separated. However, Renbaqian was different. At that time, the feeling he gave them was that of a wolf that would swallow people whole without spitting out the bones. He was filled with a sinister aura. The reason why they felt this way was because of the contrast between Renbaqian's usual behavior and his behavior at that time. This kind of contrast made them feel that Renbaqian was originally this kind of person. That afternoon, the Empress was in the palace looking at a piece of paper that recorded Renbaqian's actions. And below her was Gu Daxiong, who was known to not care about anything. Interesting. The Empress laughed. Renbaqian's actions this time made her feel that it was interesting. Even she didn't expect that Renbaqian would actually do such a thing. It was different from what she originally thought. However, this made her feel that it was very interesting. Gu Daxiong, who was below, heard the Empress's words and laughed. This Deputy Ren looks like a weakling, but when he does things, he is rather straightforward. Originally, I was a little worried, but now, I can wash my hands of this matter. Let him do what he wants, the Empress said indifferently. Yes, Gu Daxiong replied. At the same time, in the residence of Great Xia's envoy in Deo, Lian Baoqing had a ferocious look on his face. That Honglu deputy with the surname Ren, I want him dead. Is there any way? Sitting opposite Lian Baoqing was a man in his 30s. He had a beard and slightly tanned skin. In fact, before coming to Deo, he wasn't like this. However, after staying in Deo for a long time, it was fine if he didn't want to be tanned. His name was Gu Zicheng. At this moment, he was looking at Lian Baoqing with a smile. Do you think this is Great Xia? It is precisely because this is Deo that I came to look for you. You can state your conditions, for example, helping you return to Great Xia. Lian Baoqing said. Gu Zicheng shook his head slightly. Even though your proposal is very tempting and I have long been sick of this damn place, I still have to say that this is Dao, not Great Xia. This is the territory of those barbarians. Creating trouble here is tantamount to seeking death. They won't care about your identity. You should have experienced this before. Let me give you a suggestion, swallow your anger first. Lian Baoqing stared intently at Gu Zicheng. After a while, he said, then you can stay here until you die. After Lian Baoqing left, a young man in a loose robe with big sleeves walked in from the next room and sat opposite Gu Zicheng. Your Highness. Gu Zicheng bowed his head. No need to be so courteous. The man who was addressed as Your Highness laughed. This generation of the Lian family is really good for nothing. Each of them is worse than the other. He was the 7th prince of Great Xia. No one would have thought that he would leave his attendants and convoy behind and travel lightly to Lan City. Hearing him say this, Gu Zicheng also laughed. The Lian family was also a wealthy and influential family in Great Xia. They had stood tall for hundreds of years and produced talented people in every generation. However, this generation of youngsters was indeed good for nothing. However, I am really interested in this Deputy Ren. The 7th prince smiled. I don't know much either. I have heard that this person was sent to prison more than a month ago. After that, he was brought out to stay in the Beast Park for some time and became the Honglu deputy. Before that, no one knew anything about him. Speaking of which, it is really weird. The 7th prince squinted his eyes slightly. Suddenly, a person like this popped out from a rock. He spoke softly and then laughed. If Ren Baqian saw the 7th prince at this moment, he would definitely be shocked. This was because other than his hairstyle and temperament, the 7th prince's face was exactly the same as his. There was almost no difference, as if they were carved from the same mold. When the 7th prince saw Ren Baqian from afar, he felt this way. Therefore, Ren Baqian's current position in his heart was second only to the purpose of his visit to Dao. A person who looked exactly like him made him feel a little weird. It was enough to have one person in this world. There was no need for another person who looked exactly like him. Chapter 84. Ren Baqian naturally did not know what was happening in other places. From that day onwards, he started to get busy. He could not even care about the air coolers anymore. After Tong Jia made the outer shell, he threw it to caretaker Shi. As for the price, it was 15 taels of silver each. Anyway, the people who bought it weren't ordinary people. It didn't matter if it was expensive. The production method of this thing was too simple. It could only earn a sum of money. As long as it was sold, there would definitely be imitations. Although Dao people weren't good at doing business, they weren't stupid. They just needed to find someone to make this thing. Almost all the money was under their feet. They would at least know how to bend their backs. Even if Dao people were really stupid, there were still merchants from other countries. Ren Baqian's mind wasn't on this. Although a few hundred taels of silver wasn't a small amount, it wasn't very important to him. What he didn't know was that when caretaker Shi placed this thing in the newly renovated shop on Jingyang Avenue, it immediately attracted the interest of many people. Especially after it was demonstrated that it could produce cold air with ice cubes. Out of a total of 20 air coolers, 7 were sold on the first day. The remaining 13 were completely sold the next day. It was much faster than what Ren Baqian initially expected. In fact, there was one thing that he didn't know. Ever since the Empress gave the air coolers to the Empress, she often used them even during court sessions. The other officials had long been envious of them. When the air coolers were placed in the shop, they were immediately sold out after being discovered. 20 air coolers earned more than 200 taels of silver. Caretaker Shi's eyes immediately turned red and he hurriedly looked for Ren Baqian. Upon hearing this news, Renbochin was somewhat surprised. He already knew that the air coolers would definitely be sold. However, he didn't expect them to be sold out so quickly. He asked caretaker Sher to go to the previous shop and order another 100 air coolers. He reckoned that they would still be able to catch up with the sales. After leaving the matter to caretaker Sher, Renbochin continued to deal with the affairs of the Honglu Bureau. As the day of the Empress's birthday approached, more and more people arrived in Lon City. Many of them were originally from families with businesses in Dayo. As their own caravans frequently came and went, they were very accurate with their timing. Usually, they would arrive about a week in advance. At this point in time, there were already more than 70 batches of people arriving in Lon City. Most of them came in convoy after convoy. Other than the gifts and people that were to celebrate the Empress's birthday, there were also a large number of goods. The Empress's birthday celebration was in a week's time. Renbochin reckoned that there would be a lot of people coming during these last few days. After a while, he would be able to get rid of this stall. Renbochin put down his brush, stretched himself, and yawned. These days, he was indeed a little busy. After all, things were different from before. Nowadays, he had to make decisions on many matters, arrange personnel, and even mediate disputes. Just as he had thought, none of the people who could come here were ordinary people, and none of them were kind. They were all used to being domineering in their own homes. What are you looking at? What's wrong with looking at you? What do you think? Cut you up. Charge. Almost 9 out of 10 disputes started with something like this. There were many powerful people in this world, and Renbochin had met a few of them recently. However, all kinds of arrogant and despotic young masters who were originally at home fighting chickens and walking dogs couldn't change their behavior when they came here. Even in China, a place with advanced information technology, there were many of such people, let alone in a feudal society. Basically, they only wandered around within 100 miles of their homes. Even though they had learned a lesson from the mistakes of others, they couldn't care less when they were hot-blooded. These few days, Renbochin hanged 3 people to death. They were hanged alive. Xiong Pai wrapped a rope around their necks and lifted them up. The 3 people started to struggle continuously until they finally breathed their last. Such a way of handling things gave many hot-blooded young masters a huge shock. It made them feel like they had seen a ghost when they saw Renbochin. Renbochin's methods were really too ruthless, but he still had a good-natured look on his face at all times. Even when he was ordering people to kill, his expression didn't change at all. It was not uncommon for them to kill people, and some of them had even done it with their own hands. However, Renbochin's behavior still made them feel a chill in their hearts, especially when there was a monster like Xiong Pai behind him. After a few times of this, no matter what happened, as long as Renbochin and Xiong Pai stood there, everyone would immediately scatter like birds and beasts. What had happened in the past few days had spread throughout Lon City. Many people knew that the Honglu Bureau had an additional deputy who looked gentle but was actually cruel and merciless. As for those young masters from the other 3 countries, they hated Renbochin to death and wished they could slice him to death with a knife. They had thought about how they would deal with Renbochin if he fell into their hands. If it was really as they thought, it would be hard for Renbochin to die if he fell into their hands. However, they had no choice but to lower their heads now that they were under the eaves. At this moment, these young masters knew that Renbochin was at least more powerful than them in Lon City. They couldn't help but be convinced. In the past, during the Empress's birthday celebrations, there would always be people who caused a lot of trouble. However, this year, there were much fewer. Even the Public Order Bureau was very surprised. In a village on a mountain that was a day's journey away from Lon City, Qi Ji was carving a puppet with a small knife. Not long after, he heard a commotion at the entrance. A burly man rode a horse into the village and jumped off. He strode toward Qi Ji and said, "Rascal, you are very carefree here." Qi Ji immediately laughed and said, "It's much more comfortable than dealing with those bastards. I finally don't have to see those bastards this year. In my opinion, Her Majesty might as well throw me into the army. I will be more comfortable there." "Who asked you to lose that time?" Qi Ji's face immediately turned black when he heard that burly man's words. "How's the Honglu Bureau? That rascal hasn't been tormented to death by those people, right?" Qi Ji changed the topic. That burly man's expression immediately became a little strange when he heard this. "What's wrong?" Qi Ji asked curiously when he saw his expression. "Hee, that bunch of fellows are like mice seeing a cat when they see that rascal now." Qi Ji's curiosity was immediately piqued when he heard this. "What's going on?" "When I was around, those bastards never behaved themselves. They gave me trouble every day and couldn't wait to strangle each and every one of them to death." That burly man laughed and told him some of the things he knew. "Those bastards are all scared to death. Every one of them is scared to death when they see him. As long as he stands there, they don't even need to say a word. No matter what dispute there is, they will just turn around and leave." Qi Ji touched his short stubble and scolded, "Damn it, I broke 4 people's legs last year, but that bunch of fellows didn't even take it seriously. They really think that I am easy to bully. Next year, if there is any more trouble, I will just kill them. If not for the fact that they were gifts to Her Majesty, do you think I won't kill them?" That burly man laughed again and then shook his head. "You can't scare them. You are just a little unreasonable and tyrannical, and you kill people cleanly. But that rascal is different. He is like a snake. I didn't see it live, but I heard them say that the rascal had a smile on his face and asked Xiong Pai to put a rope around the necks of the people and hang them to death. He just used a big knife to chop them. There is nothing scary about that. He's smiling at you, asking about your well-being, and stabbing you with a knife. That's how scary it is." Qi Ji threw the knife in his hand forward and stabbed it into a wooden board. He seemed to feel aggrieved that he was actually not as good as that weak rascal. "Damn it, I originally thought that the rascal would be tortured badly and wondered why Her Majesty didn't send someone more powerful. I didn't expect him to be so powerful." Qi Ji scolded and then slapped the burly man's leg. "But who did you learn this from?" "The people from the Qin nation said it." "I learned it from them," the burly man said with a smile. Chapter 85. When it was almost night time, Renbochin was summoned to the palace. Once he entered the palace, he saw the Empress dressed in red muslin standing in front of a table. On top of the table was a painting. "Greetings, Your Majesty," Renbochin greeted. The Empress turned around and sized up Renbochin. Then, she nodded her head and said, "I haven't seen you for a few days. You look more like you now. Since I am working for Her Majesty, I have to look presentable. Otherwise, I will embarrass Her Majesty," Renbochin said. "Well said and well done," the Empress praised. "As long as Your Majesty doesn't blame me for acting rashly. If you were afraid, you would have come to beg for forgiveness long ago." The Empress curled her lips. "These days, I have been wholeheartedly thinking about completing the task Your Majesty has given me. How could I care about anything else? Even if Your Majesty really wants to blame me, I have to settle the matter first," Renbochin quickly said. Once again, the Empress shifted her gaze from the painting to Renbochin. "If you are telling the truth, I will be very happy. Of course it's the truth. I don't dare to hide anything from His Majesty. I will speak my mind." The Empress was non-committal. She would be a fool if she believed everything that Renbochin said. Renbochin was naturally aware of this. However, no matter how many times he tried to flatter someone, flattering them more and showing his loyalty would always bring him a lot of benefits. It was just a few words, nothing more. He felt that if he had been as smart and quick-witted as he was now, he wouldn't have been so miserable. The Empress turned around and returned to her couch. She stretched out her palm, and Hong Wuan immediately poured a cup of wine and placed it in her hand. This wasn't the first time Renbochin had seen such a scene. He had always been curious about how Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan knew when the Empress wanted something. Furthermore, looking at the Empress's expression, their every move was exactly what she wanted. It can't be a roundworm in my stomach, right? However, this ability was what he was striving for. Although no one has reported you these 2 days, they will probably come when the time comes. What do you think I should do? Although you did a good job, they were all gifts for me. If I let them go out with a belly full of complaints, it would be inexcusable. But we don't want to punish you. After all, you're working for us, and what you're doing is to our liking. Tell me, what should I do? When Renbochin heard what the Empress said, his mind spun. There seemed to be only one path in front of him: admit your guilt and accept the punishment. Even though the Empress wouldn't really punish him and was just saying it to test his thoughts, Renbochin knew that the Empress wouldn't punish him. If she were to be punished, the Empress would lose face. He worked for her, but in the end, he had to take the blame. When had the Emperor of Dao ever done such a thing? Dao had always given people the impression of being rude and overbearing. He had never cared about what others thought. Renbochin raised his head and said to the Empress, "With your Majesty's dignity, why would you care about the opinions of others, let alone those thieves and rascals? Will His Majesty give them an explanation?" After hearing Renbochin's reply, the Empress revealed a smile on her face. Soon after, she burst into unbridled laughter. Her red lips were on fire. At this moment, the feeling that the Empress gave him was like a ball of flame, unbridled and flamboyant. Hong Wuan, give storyteller Ren a glass of wine. Renbochin gulped down the wine in her cup and laughed heartily. Renbochin took the wine cup. Just by smelling it, he knew that it was strong wine. He raised the cup with both hands and said, "Thank you for the wine, Your Majesty." After finishing his sentence, he drank the wine in one gulp. A scorching heat flowed into his stomach. Well said. Why would I care about the opinions of others when I do things? The Empress praised. Your Majesty is well versed in both literature and martial arts. No matter what you do, you have your own limits. Naturally, you don't need to care about what others think or say. Renbochin knew that his words had touched the Empress's heart. He immediately struck while the iron was hot. After the Empress laughed out loud, she raised another cup of wine and poured it into her mouth. There are 4 more days before the great hunt. Inform them that they can bring along a follower. Report the name list in 2 days. Renbochin was slightly stunned. Great hunt. He had never heard of this before. When the time comes, you have to perform well and don't embarrass me. All right, you can leave now. Yes, Your Majesty. Renbochin pondered as he left the palace. What was going on with this great hunt? Furthermore, Her Majesty wanted him to participate. It seemed like he had to find someone to ask. After returning to the Beast Park, Renbochin immediately went to look for Caretaker Shi. He saw Caretaker Shi holding a stone padlock at the entrance of the house and moving it up and down. No wonder Caretaker Shi had muscles all over his body. Renbochin usually did not pay attention to them. Caretaker Shi was also training his muscles every day. Sure enough, muscles were trained, not nurtured. When Caretaker Shi saw Renbochin, he threw the stone padlock to the side and laughed. I'm getting old, but I'm not as strong as before. If it was 10 years ago, I wouldn't even need to exert any strength to do this. At this moment, caretaker Sher was sweating profusely and panting a little. Sometimes, when Rinpoche looked at these aboriginals, he felt that it was time for him to train. However, after thinking about it, even if he became a muscle maniac, he wouldn't be able to withstand a slap. If there was an opportunity, it would be better to get some martial arts manuals from this world. At least he wouldn't be too weak to fight a chicken. How's the matter with the air cooler? Rinpoche asked. We have produced 30 air coolers in the past few days and sold more than 20 of them. The remaining ones will probably be sold tomorrow. Caretaker Sher was excited when he mentioned this. Rinpoche nodded his head. He estimated that it was about time. A total of more than 40 air coolers had been sold. There should be imitations soon. However, with so many young masters coming over recently, if they knew about this air cooler, they would not be stingy to buy one. It should be able to sell for a while. This air cooler should be able to earn at least 1,000 taels of silver. Caretaker Sher, I have something to ask. What's the great hunt? Rinpoche changed the topic to the autumn hunt. It's almost time. Caretaker Sher immediately replied after hearing Rinpoche's question. It's a custom. Every year on this day, people would carry a bow and knife and go hunting in the mountains. The more prey they have, the better their lives will be in the coming year. Furthermore, if they manage to hunt prey like the sharp-toothed tiger, they will be favored by the ladies back in the stronghold. It's also held in Lawn City. It's mainly held in the stronghold. However, Her Majesty will hold it once every year. The children of various influential families will participate in it to display their individual strength. Some who have grudges will also compete with each other during this time. In previous year's Great Hunt, did those who came to celebrate Her Majesty's birthday also participate? Of course. The youngsters of the Aboriginals are not as weak as them. We have to make them understand this point, Caretaker Sher replied as a matter of course. Rinpoche was enlightened. It turned out that the purpose of displaying one's strength was to let other nations see how brave the youngsters of Dayot were. This way, they would naturally feel a sense of fear in their hearts. When they returned and told others, their reputation would naturally spread. Soon after, Rinpoche's face turned green. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.